And they rank Ben Johnson as the worst head coach in the NFC North. And it starts off by saying there's a recent list of NFL head coaches. Has the Chicago Bears, Ben Johnson, below his divisional counterpart. So I'm going to ask you right away. Let's put it up to a poll. Can't imagine that this poll is going to be anything but might as well talk it out. Is Ben Johnson the worst coach in the NFC North? I'll give you my honest opinion. No, he is not. He is not. But he's pretty damn close. And I'm not going to allow 1 year of success on a fourth place schedule put him up on a pedestal where he doesn't belong just yet. I guess for some of you that maybe don't like the trajectory that the Lions have taken over the last couple of seasons, I think that they've been playing just fine. And I think that it's all relative given to injuries. When Ben Johnson came into Chicago, he was given a pretty decent roster to start with. They drafted a few players that ended up playing early for them. That worked out pretty well, especially like Luther Burden. Caleb Williams had a much better season as protected. But then again, he can't complete anything over 54%. So I don't put everything... I don't look at the Bears last year and say that they're a complete team. I don't even think that they're even close to being a complete team. And I think they have a lot of problems. I think they have a lot of holes. And then this year it got even worse with a lot of players that they lost. They have a ton of holes. So now this is where a coach separates themselves. Are you going to fill the holes, right, with the needs that you need? Also draft extremely well. Some of that's out of his realm because that's Ryan Poles' job. I don't know the hierarchy between Ben and Ryan Poles, but based on what I've gathered, it's Ryan Poles that is going to be making the decisions with Ben Johnson's influence. I think that's a little bit different in Detroit. I think that they're more 50-50 in their approach. However, I would say that this is where a coach has to separate themselves. Can you take what could be a subpar roster going up against a much better division and a much better or a much harder schedule and still maintain that standard that you think that you built in your first season? And I don't think it's going to happen for him. I really don't. But I'm not going to say that Ben's the worst coach. I think that there's worse coaches out there. But when you look inside the NFC North, man, he's kind of at the bottom, isn't he? He's kind of at the bottom because right now I'd say that Dan Campbell is the better head coach in the league. Where do you rank the rest of them? Where's LaFleur? Where's O'Connell? I mean, where are these guys? Where do you think that they are? I guess if I'm gonna rank them, it's gonna be Dan. It's probably going to be LaFleur. LaFleur and O'Connell are kind of the same. Right now, they have great season, then bad season, then great season, then bad season. I think what Kevin O'Connell did with Sam Darnold was just epic, but I think that was a lot of Sam Darnold, to be honest with you. I'll probably put Kevin O'Connell ahead of LaFleur. I'll put LaFleur in third and Ben Johnson in fourth right now. And look, last season was last season. I don't care that they won the NFC North. They really didn't win it. It was kind of handed to them. Everybody else lost, right? And they were at home on a weekend when they got handed the NFC North title. So they didn't go out and win a game, like the Lions had to win each, time that they went up against the NFC North was late in the year. Week 18 against the Vikings was probably the clearest of all separators for me when it comes to head coaches. Dan Campbell had to go win that game. It was win or you're potentially taking, a fourth seed or fifth seed, whatever it was, sixth seed. And they won. Now, we couldn't do anything after the fact, but they put it all on the line. They figured out a way to win. And they were going up against a much better roster at that time that the Vikings had. They were a premium roster over what the Lions had. So the conversation inside this article, it kind of starts out with, let me get back to it. It kind of starts out with, okay, fine. I'll admit it. The headline is a bit sensationalized and clickbaity. Yeah, you're right. It was not my article, but this is Gridiron Windy City. It says NBC ranks Bears Ben Johnson as the worst head coach in the NFC North. But it goes on to say that it's time to get more eyes on all the fantastic offseason work our team here at Windy City Gridiron is doing. Yada, yada, yada. They go in and talk about the dueling Dexter Lawrence articles. Does Dexter Lawrence belong in Chicago? Does he not? I mean, I wouldn't think so, but we'll see what happens. I doubt it. We'll see what happens. But they go on to talk about this article, right? So on that NBC article, it's not quite as negative as it seems, talking about Ben Johnson, as NBC's Patrick Daugherty ranked Ben Johnson the 13th overall among the 22 head coaches that he ranked. He didn't rank the new head coach hires, but he did provide a write-up on them after the list. So out of the 22 head coaches that remained from last year to this year, Ben was 13th. 13th. So that was worse than half, right? He's in the bottom half of the 22 that remained. Goes on to say that in a league and media landscape addicted to hyperbole and quick fixes, no label gets misapplied more frequently than offensive genius. Well, that may be a franchise savior, I guess, in Ben Johnson, or when he arrived in Chicago, to expectations to be both a franchise saver and an offensive genius. He was tasked with fixing Caleb Williams. I don't think he fixed anything with Caleb Williams. I think what they fixed was the offensive line, and there was a drastic improvement from how many sacks that Caleb Williams took in his rookie season to last year. Huge improvement. I think that it was a crazy number. 68 to 24 sounds about right. 68 sacks in his rookie season to 24 in his sophomore season in the NFL. The Bears went from the 26th in offensive EPA per play to 7th. That's a big jump. They scored 131 more points than the year prior, jumping from 28th in the NFL to 9th in scoring. So offense is it fixed? Are you done with it? Probably not. Now, if that were the longed for first step, which was trying to fix the offense, then step two was something along the lines of just stop getting embarrassed in the rugged NFC North. Johnson won the division, earned the conference number 2 seed, and then got humiliated, humiliated arch rival Green Bay with an epic wild card comeback, 1 year, etc. But the Bears are no longer embarrassing. It's been 1 year, and I'm glad that they put that in there. It's been 1 year. Now, a lot of Lions fans felt that in 2022, we were on the come up, right? We were on the come up. We finished 9-8. We finished strong. We didn't start very strong. I think we started 1-6. But then it go, what was it, 10-2 or was it 10-2? I think we had like a 10-2 run or something crazy. But anyway, we finished, no, not 10-2 run. 8-2 run. We finished 9-8. You know what the season was in 2022. We think we had an 8-2 run. But anyway, they say in 2025 that the Bears were lucky. You're damn right they were. Living off of one score and even sometimes 1-point victories. Regression comes for even the best players and coaches, which it will. And the follow-up will be 10 times more difficult than the opening act. Johnson knows this. And as the rare offensive-minded coach who doesn't just call plays, but sets the tone for all 53 of his players, he seems perfectly suited to keep leveling up. We'll see what happens in 2026. You should never speak too soon in the NFL. Chip Kelly, right? What happened to him? Like, he had an epic entrance to the NFL, and that quickly washed away. So, but it seems, as this article states, that it won't take long for Johnson to accomplish even greater things for Chicago, which is all yet to be seen. So I guess the they were lucky narrative, it should stick. They have to follow it up with round 2. And round 2 is, what is Ben Johnson going to do in year 2? And can he take what could end up being a subpar roster compared to last year's team, huge losses on the offensive line, and turn that into something? We'll see. Someone once said that, quote, luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity. I have a different version of that statement, but he goes on to say that they doubt that the 2026 Bears will be less prepared to execute Johnson's offense than they were in 2025. And I think that's a good point. Look, they just went through a major overhaul with Ben Johnson, right? Offensively, defensively with Dennis Allen. And now this season, you have both of those pillars still in place, Ben Johnson and Dennis Allen. So they shouldn't be less prepared, right? You should be in year 2. You're going to install a little bit more. Players should be a little bit more comfortable in your system. There's a ton of roster changeover this season. So some of that stuff is going to have, an impact, right? I mean, when you're bringing in new players, it's going to have an impact, whether it's positive or negative, on the roster and on the output, for the team this season. So I think the draft is important, right? It's important for all teams, but it's important for teams like the Bears that are looking to bounce back, and they're going to have a tougher schedule this season. And to me, that's where the rubber meets the road, right? Caleb Williams has not been good. Like, I don't care about the late game heroics. I really don't. That doesn't win very often in the NFL. I'll give you a solid case point, okay? Aaron Rodgers has what? One Super Bowl win? And that was, 2011, I believe? One Super Bowl win. How many games did he have that were late game heroics? The Hail Mary that we all know, right? But how many fourth quarter comebacks? Matthew Stafford. How many fourth quarter comebacks did he have? A ton. Like, I think it was the most in the NFL when he left Detroit. But Aaron Rodgers was the king of the late game comeback. He was the king of those 1 to 3 point wins for probably 7-8 years of his career. And it just never reached the pinnacle of getting to the Super Bowl more times, more often, right? Going deep into the playoffs. So I would say that if you want to have late game heroics, it doesn't always pan out. You have to have something on the other side of that. You have to have a continuance of being consistent in what you do, play in and play out, and have, the metrics, all the analytics that we study and that we look at, they do matter. If you're only completing 54% of your balls, at some point, you're only going to complete 54%. You're going to lose a lot of games. You're going to lose a ton of games. And when you go up against better football teams, when you're going up against the number one roster that they're going to, or number one schedule that they're going to have this year, do you really think that they're going to have worse defenses in that schedule? Nope. They're going to have better defenses. And that's the whole other side of this for Ben Johnson, is their defense just lost a ton of production on the backside of that football, right? In the deep thirds. They lost a ton of production. Now, they brought in one of the most savvy players in Kobe Bryant, the guy that I wanted to land in Detroit. But look, they have to work together, man. Like, the consistency's not there, right? The cohesion is not there. For all intents and purposes, it's going to be a new defense on the back end. They're going to have some hangover from the year before, but they lost a ton of production. So late game heroics don't impress me. I think that late game heroics with a consistent winning strategy, that tends to work out more in the NFL than it doesn't. For players like Jared Goff and the Detroit Lions, if you could throw in some late game heroics, which we've had, that tends to work out a little bit better for a team that has been winning, right? A team that has been, a top 5 ranked offense for the last 3 seasons at least. And when you can do that year in and year out, and you have a consistent, completion rate at or near 68+% of the time, that's a big difference from 54%. And so trusting Jared Goff to go deep into a game where he's going to need something to happen. Look, it's going to happen more often for a guy like that than it is for a guy that's just running around slinging a football and then just having a chance that it gets completed or ends up in the end zone and get a lot of breakdowns in defense. Yeah, those breakdowns in defense are not going to happen all the time with better defenses out there. So is Ben Johnson the worst NFL head coach in the NFC North? Well, according to this, it says that Johnson was ranked just below Vikings head coach Kevin O'Connell, Green Bay Packers Matt LaFleur, and his mentor Dan Campbell. Dan Campbell was ranked the 8th best coach, Matt LaFleur the 10th, O'Connell the 12th, and Ben Johnson the 13th. We'll see what happens this year. I'm not expecting the Lions to lose to the Bears at all, period. I don't see it. I don't see it happening. So now it's up to you. Where do you agree or disagree with Ben Johnson being ranked at the 4th best head coach in the NFC North? Which would be last. 83% of you say that no, Ben is not the worst coach in the NFC North. So that begs the question, where do you put him? 2, 3, 1? Where do you put him? I think he's better than, well, let me say that again. I think O'Connell is definitely better of a coach than what Ben Johnson is. The flash and the dance of last year, just not impressive, man. It's 1 year. It's 1 year against a crap schedule. So I want to see it bounce back again this year. I mean, I don't want to see it bounce back, but I would want to see it for any coach to repeat the second season. What did Dan Campbell do? All right, so if you look at a trajectory of what a coach has done successfully, Dan Campbell went 3-13-1, 9-8. What were we? 13-4, 14-3. I think we were 13-4. And then 15-2, and then back to 9-8. That's a really good trajectory, and that was playing a first place schedule in 2024 after the 2023 season, right? Of going to the NFC Championship game. You come back and you're playing a number one schedule, and then you lose 21 players to IR. You are like the first or second most injured team that year in the league. No one expected you to win, and yet you go out and pull players from all around the league and their practice squads, and you go 15-2 on the backs of backups. That was extremely impressive. Extremely impressive. But that's not done without the head coaches, or without the head coach and Dan Campbell and who he is. It's not done without Ben Johnson, and it's not done without Aaron Glenn. Now, one of the biggest knocks, from last year on the Lions was the offense. And what I don't understand, everyone keeps pointing to the offense like there was some problem there. There was, right? Mechanically, there was some problems. Functionality, there was some problems. There was a little bit less cohesion because you don't have the same coach, right? I mean, it's a lot of cohesion missed, but you have 12 other coaches that disappeared off your roster. And so you're fighting through that, developing new relationships with players and coaches alike, and positional coaches, and they still have a top 5 offense. As many problems as the Lions had last year, the fact that they still had a top 5 offense is mind-boggling. So that should tell you something, right? It's less about the coaches. It's more about the players. And I'm not throwing any shade on Dan Campbell or anybody else, but it's the players that are out there making the plays. You're calling the play, but they still have to perform. And so when you look around the league and you look at, the teams that have a lot of success, I think that there are some that have a ton of success because of what their coaches do and what their coaches teach and how their coaches call the game and how they're instinctual at times throughout the game. But when you don't have the longevity of a coaching career, then you look at the teams that do well that don't have that. It's the players, right? It's absolutely the players. And I think that the Lions have an extremely good mix of veteran players, and they still do, even after some losses this year. They have an extremely good mix of veteran leadership and young core that has been the mainstay for this team over the last couple of seasons, that this team has really grown with, i.e. the players from 2023 forward that they've been drafting. A lot of those players are the reason why the Lions are where they are today. So that's it, man. Ben Johnson, who's the number 1 rated coach in the NFC North? Clearly, that's Dan Campbell. And that's not being biased. I believe that. Who's the number 4 rated coach? Well, according to Gridiron Windy City, their own publication out of Chicago, it's Ben Johnson. He's the fourth rated coach in the NFC North. He's the 13th overall rated coach in the NFL. Agree or disagree? Let me know in the comments below. And then we'll be right back here with more. 1 second.
Pressured by Hutchinson, he goes down again.
Okay, I didn't have a chance to go through the Peter Schrager mock draft last week. I don't really go through a lot of these things during the time that I'm trying to write and put my boards together, which I'll do my best to get everything out this week. It's had a rough weekend, man. Not feeling the greatest. But I do want to go through that today. And then I think right now the most important information is really what's going to happen with Jahmyr Gibbs before the draft or during the draft. And there was, the left shoe already dropped. And what I had mentioned about a week and a half ago is that the information that I had was quite simple, that the Lions were looking to get Jahmyr Gibbs a new contract and get it done before Bijan Robinson. Now the latest intel is telling me that their camp may be holding out for Bijan Robinson to get a deal done. Bijan Robinson just had his 5th year his 5th year picked up, right? And so that kind of changes the game with where the Lions are. Where are they in negotiations, right? And how does this affect them? How does it affect them in their plans moving forward with Jahmyr Gibbs? And I think that the 5th year option affects them big time. I think that you have to get that done clearly. I'm surprised that it hasn't been done already, but it hasn't been done. The question is why? Why have the Lions not already picked up the 5th year option? You would think that it's just an automatic. Now, are they just waiting for headline time? Is that what they're waiting for? Are they waiting for the draft like it seems like they always do? Or before any significant date? It seems like, the trade deadline is another one that they systematically will wait to put out a major headline about a player that is a major player for their organization. Getting Aiden, Hutchinson's deal done last year, and Brad Holmes, or the year before, whatever year it was, last year. And then Brad Holmes stating that it wasn't planned that way. It just happened that way. Well, things kind of just happen often then, because before every draft and before every trade deadline, we seem to get major headline news from the Detroit Lions. So here we are a couple of weeks away from the NFL draft, and we don't know what we don't know. And what we don't know is, when is Jahmyr Gibbs going to get done? Now, as I mentioned a couple weeks ago, I was told to get done by the draft. And now with Bijan Robinson's 5th year option being picked up, I'm not so sure that doesn't push them out a little bit further. right? I can never fully count on information that I'm hearing. When things like this happen, we still haven't seen any action. We still haven't seen any movement out of Detroit. And so let me just kind of read what happened with Bijan Robinson real quick, and then we'll figure out how does that affect or not affect the Jahmyr Gibbs extension, right? Possibility extension. So Bijan Robinson obviously was locked up by the Atlanta Falcons currently through the end of the 2027 season. So that would be the same. That would be the same for the Lions, right? Jahmyr Gibbs would be locked up through the 2027 season when they pick up his fifth-year option. Now, picking up the fifth-year option does a couple of things. One, it gives you that extra year of control, and when you do an extension, then you're going to get that money won't hit until after that year, typically, unless they're rewriting an entire new contract. That fifth-year option is put in place to lower the cap hit, especially when the cap hit is expected to be a lot larger than what the fifth-year option is. And in this case, it is. I'm hearing running backs like Bijan Robinson and Jahmyr Gibbs could touch $25 million per year, right? Per year. I don't remember what Saquon Barkley had, but that's the number that I'm hearing, $25 million per year. Going any further than that, I don't know that I would do it. But anyway, Robinson led the NFL with 2,298 all-purpose yards last season, entering year 4 of his career after being selected with the 8th pick of the 2023 NFL Draft. And no player has had more than his 5,648 yards from scrimmage in the last 3 years. Only Derrick Henry and Saquon Barkley have had more than his 3,910 rushing yards in that time. Now I'm going to hit pause on that. Okay. He's had 3,910 rushing yards in 3 seasons. Jahmyr Gibbs has had 3,580. 3,580. So you're talking a difference of, what is that? Not even 400 yards? 330. 330 yard difference. The biggest difference for me, though, is touches, right? How many touches has Jahmyr Gibbs had compared to Bijan Robinson? So far throughout his career, Jahmyr Gibbs has had 675 carries. Let me pull up Robinson here. Because this stuff matters, right? To me, it matters. When I hear these things or you read these things, it's like, okay, well, great. He's had the most yards, since 2023 for anyone drafted, at that position, or I think at any position, honestly, since that draft. But that doesn't really tell the full story, does it? It doesn't tell the full story. Now, I'm not making excuses for anybody, namely Gibbs. I'm not making any excuses at all. But I think you have to holistically take into consideration here the snap load. Let me see if this is lined up here. I think it is. I think you have to take into consideration the snap load here for both of these players and what each of these players has meant, to their respective teams and how that really compares. So he's had 805 carries. 805 carries. That is a huge difference. When you're talking 330 yards, and you're also talking 130 carries difference. Okay, let's just take Jahmyr Gibbs at his average. Let's take Jahmyr Gibbs. So 3580 divided by 675. That's 5.3 per. All right, 5.3 per. We tack on another 130 carries. That's 689 yards. That would give him the lead by 359 yards. So that's a change. That's a swing of 689 yards between the two backs. If they had the same amount of carries. Jahmyr Gibbs has been in a two-back system. Bijan Robinson has been the bell cow. Right? He's been the bell cow. And so when you look at the longevity of their careers, right now I would say that Jahmyr Gibbs is going to outlast Bijan Robinson just simply because of touches, right? Just simply because of touches. When we look at Jahmyr Gibbs here, he's been averaging, last couple of seasons, about 245, right? About 245 carries per year. Bijan Robinson, let's go to his stats pages, ESPN. He's been averaging closer to 295 the last two seasons. Now, their rookie years are pretty much equal, right? 182 carries for Jahmyr Gibbs, 945 yards. Bijan Robinson had 214 carries, so, about 30 more carries, 976 yards. So he only outpaced Gibbs by like 21 yards, but he had like 30 more carries. So when I look at, player for player, right, pound for pound, Gibbs is the much better football player here. And I'll argue that all day. You can't tell me that Gibbs is not a better back than Bijan. I think they're both great. But I think that Jahmyr Gibbs has barely scratched the surface of what he can do. And you know what? We might see Drew Petzing really bring that out in Jahmyr Gibbs this year. So that's going to be my next pull of the day here. And that is it Gibbs or is it Bijan Robinson? Who's better? Obviously, I'd like to know in the comments and in the chat. Who's the better running back? Oh, yeah, Gino, let me clarify. Carries. So carries. Gibbs has 675 carries, so actual touches, right? Bijan Robinson, 805 carries. So carries, touches, same thing. You might be thinking of snaps, right? Carries, touches versus snaps, totally different. Now, I wouldn't include receptions in touches at all. I think that's totally different stat line. Excuse me. Now, receptions, since we're talking about that now, 198 receptions for Bijan Robinson, 181 for Jahmyr Gibbs. And like I said, I think that he is just now scratching the surface, right? 261 targets for Bijan, 228 for Jahmyr Gibbs, 1,449 yards receiving for Jahmyr Gibbs, 1,738 for Bijan Robinson. 8.8 average for Bijan, 8-point average for Gibbs. 10 TDs for Gibbs, 9 TDs for Bijan Robinson. So again, if you walk the statistical lines out, Gibbs is a better player here too. Okay, now Bijan has a better average. He has less touchdowns on more opportunities. Jahmyr Gibbs, less opportunities, similar yards, as far as the average, more touchdowns. Fumbles, they both have lost one ball. So I would say overall, they're very, very close as far as type of runner. I think they're very different. This year, I think that Trupetzian's going to unlock a little bit more of what Jahmyr Gibbs is capable of doing. So getting back to the root of the conversation here, and that is what happens with the fifth-year option now for Bijan Robinson. How does that affect the Lions and Jahmyr Gibbs in what they're considering or not considering doing? Well, I think at a minimum, you're going to get the fifth-year option picked up because it has to get picked up, I think, by May. I think May is the deadline. Could be wrong, but I think it's May. And so it's absolutely going to get picked up by then. Like I said, I don't know why it hasn't been picked up already. But Robinson is going to make $6.9 million this season, about the same for Jahmyr Gibbs. And that's going to balloon to $15 million in 2027, which would also be the same for Jahmyr Gibbs. However, I can't remember if there's any differences here. I don't think that there is, because Gibbs has a Pro Bowl, and I believe Bijan has a Pro Bowl. So that puts him in that next tier, right? It's going to be about $15 million for each player. So not much difference, between the two as far as what they're going to make, what they're being paid already. I think the difference is when do you get Bijan Robinson's deal done? And are they waiting for Gibbs, or vice versa? Is Gibbs camp waiting for Bijan Robinson's camp? What I didn't look at, and I want to look at this right now, is, because this will matter as well. Who is Gibbs' agent, and who is Bijan's agent? Because this absolutely matters. Todd France and Ryan Williams. So they appear to be represented by different agents, different agencies. And so that matters, because you don't have the same agent working on both deals, which, man, that would have been a power move, right? My goodness, that would have been a power move. Had they both been, with the same agency, both teams would be up Schitt's Creek. So I guess the big question is, how does this affect the Lions moving forward? And are the Lions even considering not extending Jahmyr Gibbs? Now, I will brief you in here on a conversation that I had last week with one of the scouts. And that was, kind of the same idea that I've had. Now, in no way would I ever want to get rid of Gibbs. I think he's too good of a football player. And I also believe that, his future is bright, right? I don't think that we have to worry. I mean, I guess you probably have to worry the same about every player when it comes to injury risk. But Gibbs has had, a little bit lighter of a load over the first few seasons of his career, which I think it does help. Less contact obviously is better for any player. But now the future is heavy snap load. And maybe we're wrong with that. Maybe we're thinking he's going to get a lot more simply because David Montgomery's not there. I think if you look at last season, you're probably going to get about the same. Maybe a few more in the passing game. But I think that when you look at carries, specifically, I think you can look to last season, and that's probably going to be the snap load for Jahmyr Gibbs moving forward with any, running mate that he has on the roster. Now we have somebody like Isaiah Pacheco, they can absolutely win with speed as well. And I think that gives the Lions an opportunity to give Gibbs a break. But I think when you look at that snap share alone, I think it was about 182 or 159 for David. I think it was 159 for David Montgomery. That's probably what Pacheco is going to get this year. And so what we saw out of Gibbs last season, moving forward, we should probably still expect. Like I said, I think we'll see a little bit more in the pass game. But the conversation that I had was, this wasn't my take, it was their take. You absolutely bring in a running back and a receiver. You don't sign guys to big mega deals or multiple guys on the same roster to big mega deals when you can go out and find running backs in just about every draft. You can go out and find receivers in just about every draft. And a lot of them can give you, the same or similar amount of production as what, some, your players that you're looking to replace can. It doesn't happen every time that the players you replace with can do that. But I've heard, or read or seen where people say, hey, I'm not going to get rid of a player like Jameson Williams because he can do X, Y, and Z. And I'm going to come back to that. I'm going to come back to that and tell you why I feel that is a bad take. And I feel like it's wrong to think that you can't bring in a rookie and get the same amount of production out of somebody, depending on how your roster is already laid out. Like that does matter. And if you already have a number one wide receiver on your team, which the Lions do, and I think a lot of that, to be honest, I think it's like scare tactics. People make you think like you just can't go replace somebody, and you can. It's done every year. Look around the league. Why do other teams do it? Because it can be done. You just have to be smart with who you're picking, right? You have to be smart. So the conversation said, you don't pay Gibbs. You pick up his fifth, and that's about it. And then you're going to let him walk. And between now and then, you're going to find somebody else. I don't know that I could do that. But then at the same time, I understand why a lot of GMs do this and why a lot of teams do this. The reason is running backs get injured a lot. Like one of the most injured positions on, in NFL is running back and wide receiver and cornerback. They're the positions that cut the most, right? They have the biggest impact on their joints, their ligaments, things snap. And so I get it. Like those are the positions that you want to stay young at. Those are the positions that you want to have a little bit more roster churn, as long as you're getting good players, right? I mean, that matters. And it also, like I said, it matters how your roster is built. So would you walk away from Jahmyr Gibbs after one more season and trade him? Because you would end up getting no less than 1 first-round pick. No less. Could borderline on 2. What did they get for Saquon? I can't remember what Saquon Barkley's trade was. Because that also involved a major contract that was going to get signed. Oh, you know what? Was he a free agent? I thought there was a trade there. Was he just a free agent? He was just a free agent. That's right. The Giants didn't franchise him, and they let him walk. Okay, so who are some of the bigger trades for running backs? I just did this not too long ago for David Montgomery, and I probably have the work somewhere. I want to say what David Montgomery got is what the Lions got for Montgomery was one of the better deals. I mean, getting a 3rd round pick for a second running back on your team is extremely rare. The Lions got a 4th and a 7, which is what I called. I expected that. But some of the bigger deals, bigger trades for a running back, I'm trying to think. Especially for a top running back. Like, I don't know if those happen very often. Like, none of them just rush into my brain right now. Let's see. Got David Montgomery this year. Let's see, last year, Tank Bigsby, Brian Robinson, Jordan Mason. 2024, Kyle Monangai. Cam Akers. Nothing big there. Cam Akers again. DeAndre Swift. I mean, so DeAndre Swift, we got a 4th and a 7th for him. Isn't that funny? Got the same kind of deal for David Montgomery, 4th and a 7th. 2022. Nothing big there either. I don't see any major trades. Well, Christian McCaffrey, I guess. That, if you go back to 2022, you look at Christian McCaffrey. He was a damn good running back at that time. And the Panthers ended up getting a 2nd, a 3rd, a 4th, and a 5th. And they got 3 of those in that same year, 2023. They got a 2nd, a 3rd, a 4th in 2023, and a 5th in 2024. And I would say for the Lions, they would probably get a 1, a 2, and a 3, without a doubt. A 1, a 2, and a 3. And he might get a 1 and a 3 in the same draft and a 2nd round pick in the next year's draft. I wouldn't take anything less. But the question is, how did that work out for the next team? Or how did that work out for the trading team? What did they get with those players? And has that helped Carolina in their rebuild? Look, they really haven't done much, right? The Panthers haven't done much. They're kind of at that. I guess they're at that. They're in that position now. If you understand what I'm saying, they're kind of in that position now. I'm curious. Who did the Carolina Panthers take? Let's look at the 2023 draft. I'm curious now. Let me throw this up on the screen. So would you trade Jameer? I mean, I know a lot of you are probably like, oh my God, this guy, what is he talking about? This guy talking about trading our number 1 running back. No, just having the conversation. So let's look for the Panthers here. I don't know if that was the trade. So let's find. Do they have a 2nd pick in the 2nd round? Panthers got to have 2 picks, right? Did they move up? All right, here we go. From Chicago. So the Panthers traded up, right? Wow, it doesn't tell you any of the trade information. That's a big failure, ESPN. Like that's if you're going to show a trade, at least tell people what the hell happened. I don't see anywhere where it says anything about the trade. I just want to know where those picks went. And they definitely took the wrong quarterback. All right. This would probably just be a big fishing trip, so I'm not going to do it. But anyway, if you look in the 2nd round, I think that this was Carolina's original pick. I want to say that they ended up trading multiple picks to move forward. But they got Jonathan Mingo. That hasn't worked out for them. Not yet. All right, who would they get in the 3rd round? Again, they should have multiple picks unless they traded them all to move up. They got DJ Johnson, outside linebacker. How's that worked out? That hasn't worked out great yet. also got a 4th round. Where is it? Chandler Savalas. I mean, that's a good pick. That offensive guard. I don't know that he's been great yet, but anyway, this would take a little bit more research because I don't know exactly what took place there. But trading Jahmyr Gibbs for a 2nd, a 3rd, a 4th, and a 5th. Look, that'd be a great haul, depending on which draft that it is. I would say a 1st round pick is non-negotiable for me. It's non-negotiable. Like, if you're thinking about moving off on a player like that, ain't no way I'm doing that without a 1st round pick. There's just no way. And look, I'm not saying that I want this done. I'm not saying that I want Jahmyr Gibbs to be traded. We're just having the conversation because it came up in conversation that the Lions should be looking to always upgrade their roster. And when you look at the future and money wise and picks, and if Brad is, loves to draft players, then the 2 positions you should probably always look at is receiver and running back. And where does it make sense on the roster? I think it makes more sense at receiver versus running back today. Next year, that could be different. One, depending on who's coming into the draft, right? Like, so this year, let's just say I traded Jahmyr Gibbs right now to the Jets. Let's say I traded Jahmyr Gibbs to the Jets at number 2. And I end up with Jeremiah Love. And I got some more picks out of the deal. Like we did some more trades, traded some picks around. I ended up keeping 50, maybe adding another pick. How would you feel about something like that? If you traded Jahmyr Gibbs for Jeremiah Love, unproven, right? But a complete freak. I mean, he's Jahmyr Gibbs all over again in a bigger vessel with longer arms in the pass game. How would you feel about a trade like that then? If something were, to happen with Jahmyr Gibbs, from that standpoint, then I would say, okay. All right. What if they traded Jahmyr Gibbs and they went up and grabbed Sonny Styles or Arvell Reese, right? At pick 2 or even pick 3. And they ended up with either one. Pick 4. Pick 4, they ended up with either Bailey, Reese, or Jeremiah Love. And they didn't have to give anything else up in the trade. They just straight up traded Jahmyr Gibbs, and they got a top pick in the draft and probably a 3rd round pick to boot, or a 2nd round pick to boot, just for trading Jahmyr Gibbs. And they ended up with the number 1 edge, linebacker, or running back in this draft. And you have Isaiah Pacheco right now to carry the load. Unless you brought in Jeremiah Love. Then what is your thought process, right? This is why I say it makes more sense at receiver, because you have a guy by the name of Amon-Ra St. Brown. He's been our number 1 guy, right? And he does a great job. Like I said, I was going to come back to this whole talk about trading Jameson Williams, and you can't trade Jameson Williams because he just does things that no other receiver does. BS. I'll put it this way. If speed is the only thing that you are worried about when it comes to receivers, you're missing 80% or more of what is available to you in a draft, and then what are those players doing at the next level. So let me ask you a question, and this would be the question. 1, what is Jameson Williams worth if you were to trade him? 2, when you look around the league, what are the most impactful receivers on every team? Who are the guys that are typically impacting these teams at the highest level? And if you think about it for a moment, it's not the speedy guys, right? Some teams have those guys, but it's not all the speed guys that impact these teams the most. We'll just bring in the top receiver stats from last year. And you could go to every year, right? You could do this every year. And you're going to end up with a very similar a very similar outcome. Let me close some of these windows down here. And pull up a couple things here. Give me one sec. Okay. Tough part with some of this is like some of these players don't test all the way, so it's kind of hard to get their 40 times without really digging. But we'll start with JSN. Now he was clocked somewhere between 4.52 and 4.48 at Ohio State's Pro Day. All right, let's pull him in right away. Let's get rid of that DFJ Sports logo. Okay, so Jackson Smith and Jigma led the league last year. 1,793 yards, 10 TDs. If you go down the list, Jamison Williams is in 9th spot. He had 11-17 and 7 TDs. Okay, so if you go by yardage, he's in the 9th spot. If you go by touchdowns, he's in tied for 15th with a lot of players. Right? So if you go down the list, it'll be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. 22, like he's 22nd with 7 TDs. Okay, let's go back. Oh, come on. What are you doing here? There we go. Jackson Smith and Jigma last year led the league with 1,793 yards, 10 TDs. Won a Super Bowl with JSN. His 40 time is 4.48, 4.52. Well, why is it that he's able to perform the way that he does and he's not running a 4.25 or a 4.29 or 4.35? You know, Jamison Williams is speculated to be somewhere in the 4.2s, 4.25s. I've seen 4.21, but never tested. So you're never really going to know. I would say, yeah, he's probably in that 4.3 range. You know, whether it's 4.29 or 4.31, he could be in that range. We know that his long speed is better than his shorter speed. And what his problem is the way that he doesn't snap off routes and his strength at the line of scrimmage. It's not great. And so his route running has never been perfect. And he's didn't have a developed, route tree. And last year they really tried to develop his route tree a lot more. And you could see the mistakes, right? You could see where Jared Goff and Jamison Williams weren't always on the same pace. But JMO was targeted about 17 or 18% of the time, so as far as an offensive output, he was targeted about 17 or 18% of the time. So his snap share was up there. When you look at Amon-Ra St. Brown, I want to say his was closer to 24%, if I'm not mistaken. I think it was 24%. So Puka Nacua, he's the next example. Let's pull up Puka Nacua's 40 time. And this is not going to work out. Let me undo these. Now, some of this stuff's going to be pretty subjective, right? It's pretty subjective. But we'll just go off of what AI pulled for us. 4.57. So there we go. We have Puka Nacua running a 4.57, JSN running a 4.48, 4.52. Okay? Why does that matter? Because Puka Nacua, he runs routes clean. Puka Nacua uses his strength. Puka Nacua knows where to be and how to be there. He's just a very savvy route runner, and he's smart in the way that he plays football. And I think that when you look at players that have a much better output, statistically, you're going to see a lot of players that don't run the fastest 40 time on their decel. I've said this a few times over the last couple of weeks, especially during the draft. On their decel, when they're trying to make the change to, wherever they're going in their route, on that decel, they're able to slow down enough, give the little shimmy shake, their head shake, or their hip, or whatever they're doing, and then they cut, right? And then they're able to get to where they need to go. It's the players that do run a lot faster, that if they're not just streaking down the field, they have to be able to decel and hit their spot, right, and cut and get to their landmark. And a lot of times what you see is a rounded, right? If this is my landmark, this is where I'm trying to hit, this player's coming in hot, and and then they go, right? Whereas a guy like Nacua, you getting up to a spot, he decels and he turns and he goes. It's a flatter, right? It's a flatter move going whatever direction he's going. But you see with a lot of the speedy guys is they round those things. And when you round, what happens is you can end up floating, right? You float a little bit too deep, ball can end up at your feet. Or you cut it a little early because you know that you round, and you cut it a little early, and then you end up a little bit too low. And then the ball could be high, right? I mean, it matter of a yard or two could make a difference on where that ball is going to be and when it's going to get there. How about George Pickens? And George Pickens came out of nowhere last year. What is George Pickens' 40 time? Now, I'm using speed for a reason, because that has been the only argument that anyone has ever been able to give me is speed. You can't teach speed. I know that. Saying that for years. Can't teach speed. But what you also can't teach is intelligence. You also can't teach instincts, right? You can teach technique. You can teach routes. You can teach a playbook. But a lot of these other things you just can't teach. George Pickens runs a 4.47. So why is it that the three receivers at the top of the list last year that led the league all run north of a 4.45? Make that make sense if all we need is speed. Doesn't make any sense, does it? Doesn't make any sense. How about Jamar Chase? Now he's going to be a lot quicker, right? He's going to be a lot quicker. Didn't he have an ACL or an ACL or something? Did he have a major injury over the last couple of years? So he runs a 4.38. 4.38. And where did he end up last year? On a down season, too. I'll say that. Jamar Chase had a down year. Actually had a great year for not having, Burrow back there for a long time. And I would say that that's a down year by not having Burrow back there. I'm not sure what that means, ARF. I just got the chat open, by the way. Just got the chat open. Okay, how about Amon-Ra St. Brown? We already know what Amon-Ra St. Brown runs, right? We know. It's not the fastest in the world. Oh, that's right. He didn't test at the combine. Totally forgot. 4.51. And he is one of the best route runners in the league. There is a reason why. I'm going to keep going down this list. I've got one player, Trey McBride. Well, damn, we know he doesn't run. He definitely doesn't run in the 4.2s or 4.3s, right? I don't even need to go down that road. He's probably in the 4.5s. Oh, what the hell? We'll do it. He's one of the faster guys at tight end. 4.44 or 4.54, excuse me. But it's at size, right? And there was nobody on the roster. He was like last man standing, and he still did what he did. Why is that? Why is that? He didn't need the speed, and he didn't need a roster full of playmakers to have a great year. Team just sucked. Zay Flowers, we know he's speedy. 4.42 though. 4.42. All right, let's go to the next one. Chris Olave. Next time, I'll just get this stuff prepared ahead of time. 4.39. So we got a sub 4.4 guy. 4.39. All right, Nico Collins. I'm just going to guess. 4.37. Ah, I was close. 4.42. And last but not least, Jameson Williams. Now, this one is highly speculative because it's never been tested officially. 4-1. Get the hell out of here. 4-1, my ass. I'm gonna go with I'm gonna go 4.29. I'm gonna go 4.29 for JMO, and that's being nice because Gibbs runs a 4.36, and both those guys are about the same in speed in the first 40. It's after the first 40 that Jameson Williams tends to take off and hit that second gear or third gear because he's got the longer stride. Longer striders take a little bit more time to get going. It's the shorter stride guys that generally get going a lot quicker. They get up to speed a lot quicker. Look, it's simple. It's simple mathematics and physics. If I don't need to explain it, you can YouTube it, you can Google it. Look, the guys that are their engine, I'm not even going to do it because I'm gonna go down a whole rabbit hole. But the guys that get their legs moving quicker and faster, they're going to get up to speed faster. Okay. And so that's why you've heard the argument out of Detroit now for a couple of seasons. Who's faster, Gibbs or JMO? And you've heard some players say Gibbs. You've heard some players say JMO. You've heard a lot of players say it's a tie. But then you've heard some players that say it's beyond that first 40 yards. So then I'm going to ask you a question. If it's beyond 40 yards that JMO really picks up his speed, how many times are we targeting the ball down 40 yards? Not many. How many times do teams target the ball down 40 yards? Not many. Not many at all. Matter of fact, Patrick Mahomes might be one of the leaders in deep balls over 40 yards. Jared Goff was also one of the leaders in deep balls over 40 yards over the last couple of seasons. And I think he was 5th or 7th. And that might have been like 20 balls. 20. And I think Patrick Mahomes is way outside the norm, and it was closer to like 45 or 50. So yeah, if it's 20 balls a year on 1,000 plays, I'm not so sure that I need long speed. I need quick speed. I need quick. Quick is the term, quick. I don't need long speed. I need guys that are quick. Quick to their landmark, right? Quick to their break. And making sure that they're running a clean, crisp route where they can just snap it off the top and not always overrun it. It's few and far between that you see these guys that have immense speed and physical gifts that can put it all together, right? Not all of them can do that. And even though these guys are all elite at what they do, there's a big difference with a clean route runner and a guy that's just running routes. So I'm bringing all this up, like Justin Jefferson, he's another speed guy. I'm curious what his 40 is. But he's down the list a little bit. 4.43. He's slower than I thought. He's slower than I thought. I would have put him in the 4.3s for sure. I mean, who else is on this list? CD Lamb? You know, we might as well. I mean, we got to cover all the bases, right? CD Lamb. Wow, 4.50. 4.50. So far, you know, the only two guys that I've really ever seen blaze the field, you know, outside of like Jameson Williams, which is known to be one of the faster players in the league, or one of the fastest players in the league. Let me bounce out of this. But Tyreek Hill, right? Tyreek Hill was one of the fastest players in the league, and he was probably in that 4.2 range as well. The difference between a Tyreek Hill and like a Jameson, the difference with their speed is he's a shorter, more compact receiver, 5'8", 5'9", whatever he was. He definitely can get in and snap off those routes. He's a very clean route runner. So he utilizes that quick burst, that quick speed, runs a clean route, and then he takes off where he gets, you know, that 0 to 60 speed is extremely fast. J-Mo just takes a minute, but once you get him going, you're not going to catch him. And that's why those, you know, those behind the scrimmage plays, you know, getting a handoff or reverse or something like that to J-Mo, that's why those plays are generally tough to cover if they're executed properly inside the right defense. They're tough to cover because once he breaks to the outside, he should be nearing top speed pretty soon, and he's going to be a lot faster than what, you know, a lot of running backs would be at that point. But the point that I'm trying to make with all this, it all started with trades, where it all, you know, started with, you know, when do you target receivers in the draft and how often? What I just pulled down was a list of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 of the best receivers in the NFL. And only one of them was a sub 4.3 40. And the majority of them, outside of Jamar Chase and Olave, all of the rest were 4.42 and up. The top of the board, JSN and Puka Nacua run 4.5s. CeeDee Lamb, 4.5s. St. Brown, 4.5s. So you can't sell me ever on the fact that I need speed. What I need are good, clean route runners and guys that know what they're doing and they're smart. That's what I need. All right? That's what I need. And so I'm not saying that J-Mo doesn't have a spot. I'm not saying that he's not a good receiver. I'm not saying any of that. I'm not saying that I even want to trade the guy. Not saying that either. What I am saying is when you're looking at developing a roster and how can you maximize the roster? Well, a lot of you want another edge. Why are we paying J-Mo $27 million next year? Right? Why would we do that? I think it's foolish to pay a second receiver on your team. I think J-Mo's a great dude. He's turned out to be a great dude anyway. The first couple years are rough. I think he's a phenomenal player, in spurts, but I've yet to see him dominate a game. He has never really just dominated a game. Has he had a couple of really good games? Yes. But in the absence of Amon-Ra St. Brown, he gets erased. I think he has had one good game when Amon-Ra St. Brown was out. You can take him away because his line of the scrimmage strength is not there. He gets pushed around. He's too skinny. And so for him to add on more muscle, that's going to take away from some of his speed over time. I think to a gazelle like that thrives off being, 1% body fat, the more poundage you add to him, I don't think that's going to benefit him the strength at the line of scrimmage versus what he normally does with, using his speed. I think that adding a player early in a draft makes more sense every 3 years, right? You draft a player, you see what you can get out of them. Usually by year 3, you know what they are. By year 3, they're the most tradable or they're not. Either they've turned into something or they haven't. And I would say right now, Jameson Williams' market value is the highest. And I'm going to say the same thing I said about Kirby. When your market value is the highest at a position that you can typically replace, you trade that player. That is where Brad Holmes is making his biggest mistake. It's not drafting. It's not free agency. It's hanging on to the players a little bit too long. Now, I know that this is not a fun subject. I know that this is not a subject that, the diehard Lions fans that are attached to these players want to hear. I know that. But that's why we have those conversations here. We're not afraid of it, right? We're responsible, intelligent people in this chat and on this channel. And I think that you all can have a good conversation. Attachment to players, that's part of being a fan. Right? You get attached to a player and you love their success. You buy their jerseys, whatever it is. But right there is where I draw the line. Just because I have someone's jersey doesn't mean I have to stay attached to that player. This is the NFL, man. It's not for long. These players either don't last, they don't make it, or they get traded or cut, whatever. Just because you buy their jersey doesn't mean they need to stay on this team. All right, just because they've had a couple of good seasons or a good season or a couple of good games doesn't mean that they have to stay on this team. I get criticized for not criticizing Brad Holmes. I do it in different ways, and this is one. Brad Holmes' biggest mistake is hanging on to players too long. I think that you have to make that decision that if you're trying to make your team better, and Brad has said it himself that he wants to draft, develop, and then re-sign. Okay, that's good. But if you're that good in the draft, then I think you need to draft more. And you need to draft earlier. How do you do that? Well, you draft good. You keep those players for a little while. And when they have a marketable value, you trade them. As long as you have the roster to maintain it. Now, that theory does not work when you don't have a roster to maintain it. But if you were to get rid of Jameson Williams today, are we in that big of a rut? We have Amon-Ra St. Brown. When J-Mo wasn't doing anything, what was Amon-Ra St. Brown doing? Everything. In 2022. How big of a year, how big of an impact did Jameson Williams really have in 2023? How big was his impact on the team? How responsible do you think he was for helping this team win and go to the NFC Championship in 2023? Now, this is not a J-Mo hate conversation. This is just roster conversation. That's all it is. Let's see, Mike P says, I think the reason is more Goff than J-Mo, why he doesn't dominate. Goff in our system is quick release and timing routes. Many routes are out of Goff's hands quicker than J-Mo breaks. So I don't think that's a bad thing. Like that's not a Goff issue. I think that's to your point, I think this is what you're trying to say, Mike. Correct me if I'm wrong. That the way that the system is designed in Detroit is exactly what you said. It is timing. It's timing based in rhythm, and it's quick release, and it's landmarks. You got to be to your landmark. That's where you expect to be, for the ball to be. And J-Mo's route running is not the cleanest at times. He gets pushed off his routes a little bit because he is a little bit thin. And so when he's coming across the middle, which last year, for whatever reason, he was running a lot more across the middle. That's not where I really wanted to see J-Mo. Deep middle, yes, not 8 yards middle. His ADOT last year's average depth of target was a lot less. So I think to your point, yeah, it's it's not a bad thing on Goff because Goff's able to do it with everybody else, right? Everyone else succeeds. For whatever reason, I think Morton's system was not good for him last year. But to answer the question, how impactful was Jameson Williams in 2023? I'll let that marinate for just a second here. I got to get something pulled up. All right, I will stay on for Brad Holmes at 11 o'clock. I will stay on for that. So the reason why I ask about 2023 specifically is because he had 354 yards. He had 2 touchdowns. He had 24 receptions on 42 targets. He played in 12 games. He was suspended for a little while, right? The point being, he was not extremely impactful. He wasn't a big reason as to why the Lions were winning, and wasn't a big reason as to why the Lions went to the NFC Championship. Sure, he had a hand in it, just like every other player did. But at 354 yards, your number one wide receiver that year, like I said, Amon-Ra St. Brown, was the exact reason why the Lions went the distance that they did. Now, that was his best year too, by the way. Amon-Ra St. Brown had 1,515 yards, 10 TDs, 119 receptions, and that was his best year. But every single season, Amon-Ra St. Brown since 2023 or 2022, 100 receptions, 106, 119, 115, 117. 1515 yards, 1263, 1401. 10 touchdowns, 12 touchdowns, 11 touchdowns. There's a reason why Amon-Ra St. Brown can do it and do it at a high level year in and year out. And that's because he's an extreme route runner. It's what he is. So when I look for players that I know can help any team, it's the players that run the best routes. Everything else you can teach. If they have the speed, requisite speed, 4.4, 5 to 4.53, 4.51, whatever you want to call it, I'll take any receiver with a 4.41 to a 4.55, as long as their route running is crisp, right? And their FBI is up there, right? They have to be football smart. If you have those three things, you're going to be way better off than most other players in the draft and most other players in the league. And you're going to help your team dominate more often because you're in the right damn spot. So like I said, it's not JMO hate. It's not that at all. It is just, I see where there is a much bigger opportunity for players to have more of an impact on this team when you have Amon-Ra St. Brown, you have Jahmyr Gibbs, hopefully you have Sam Laporta healthy, right? So you have an Isaac Tesla. We've already seen what he could do last year, but why is that, right? Why is it that he had the impact that he did? Very little from a target share, but when he was in the game, he had some decent impact. He's a good route runner. You go watch his routes. He's a damn good route runner. And so if our offensive line is put back, together this year, we have all the pieces to go win. And JMO's the only one that I could see really being trade bait on the offensive line. That's the only player. I don't see that with Sam Laporta, right? He's injured. Highly unlikely you're going to see that happen. That's just people pumping that stuff out there. I don't get it. JMO would be the only one that would make sense because you have a big contract coming up. And so far to date, he's had one good season. He's had one good season. And that's not what I expect from the number 12 overall pick. I got to tell you that. You can't be happy with a number 12 overall pick, today when you look at, his season. So I guess he has 2 good seasons. He had 2,000-yard seasons and 7 TDs in each season. Sure, he has the big breakaway opportunity. Just go get me another guy that can run clean routes and you're going to see big play opportunity. Why does Puka Nacua have big play opportunity? Why does JSN have big play opportunity? Why does Trey McBride have big play opportunity? They all have big play opportunity because they're in the right spot at the right time. Right? That's it. That's all that it is. They're not burning them with speed. They're burning them with intelligence. That's what they're burning them with. Let me get back into the chat here for just a moment. Let me just wind it back a little bit. Where did I leave off? Edge is not the answer says, is Brad going to announce picking up Gibbs' 5th year? He could announce it today. I don't know. I think that they're in this race, right, of trying to get it done before Bijan Robinson, and then the whole Bijan Robinson pops out. Attila says, is Brad Holmes or Dan Campbell? Oh, is it Brad Holmes or Dan Campbell? I'm pretty sure it's Brad Holmes today. I'm pretty positive it is. MD says Brad pre-Jeff. Yep, thank you for the update. I think Brad Holmes wants to cycle in and that might be cycle out, K-Biz. When it comes to the vets. Let's see. No, it has nothing to do with. I don't even know if I'm really blocked. It's just, could never see his account. I could care less about any of that. Proctor, MD, biggest boom or bust prospect in the first round. Could be a Hall of Fame or a balloon up to 400 pounds. Definitely not Aaron Gibson. Like, you can miss me with all that BS. Here's where the uneducated, and I'm not saying you're uneducated, but this is where the uneducated fan comes into play. It all starts with who you listen to and what research you do, right? Caden Proctor has not been 400 pounds since his freshman year. Caden Proctor has not weighed more than 366 since his freshman year or since his sophomore season. He might have touched real close to 370. And when he started last year, I think he started pretty close to 366 or 370 might have been the most. And then he whittled his way down. You'll have to remember too that what Alabama asks him to be at, that's where they want him to be at. If they ask him to come in at 370, he's going to come in at 370. And so that's all up to the college, man. It's all up to the program. And that's why Caden said, whatever number I've been asked to hit, I'll hit. And that's what he does. He just said that, I think last week, Thursday or Friday, that every number he's been asked to hit, he hit. Now, his freshman season coming in, he was way out of shape, being at close to 400 pounds. But when you look at a body that big, right, as big as he is, 390, 400 pounds is like, that's not extremely overweight. It's just he's going to be a little bit slower. It's a lot of mass to move. Now, if he was 6'3", 6'4", and 390, that's a problem, right? When he plays at 366, I felt like his footwork was a little bit sluggish. And so that's where I've said, with Proctor in the past, like whether he's playing at 360, 365, versus 352, I'd rather see him at 352. And so he weighed in at 348 at the combine. His official weigh-in was 352, and that's where he plans on staying. Is 352 or less is where he wants to be. If you watch, I don't know, 10 out of the 15 games, whatever he played last year, or maybe a little bit more than that, he was at that under 360, and so he played extremely well. I mean, we've heard the one-liners, right? Like Daniel Jeremiah said, he touched at 390 pounds or close to 400 pounds, and that was freshman year, right? And so I don't know why people get worried about that stuff, especially coming in, to the NFL where you're going to be asked to be at a certain weight and you're going to have to weigh in at least once a week anyway. So I'm not worried about it. Not worried about it one bit. And as far as biggest boom or bust prospect, that was the title of my video about Caden Proctor. He's labeled that way by a few people. I don't necessarily believe it. And I think that what you're going to get out of Caden Proctor at a minimum is going to be one of the best guards to play the game. His footwork, everything that he does, if he was to be slid inside at guard, he's going to be an all-pro quickly. There's a reason why the smart people in the room have him as the second best overall tackle in this draft. When I look at other players, I see way more deficiencies. Like Caleb Lomu. Like, I don't know where people think that Caleb Lomu should ever be a first-round draft pick unless you're just looking at that 5th year of control. He's not a first-round pick. Like, anything after Proctor as far as tackles, they're not first-round picks. They all have deficiencies. Every single one of these players has deficiencies. But Proctor's going to be just fine, man. And you can't compare a player to Aaron Gibson. I don't even know who started that rumor, but there's been 2 players in Lions history over the last, 30 years that ever had a weight issue. 2 players. And I don't really care what happened with the Lions in 1980 or 1990 or even in 2000. Like, the Lions have never had an issue since 2021, and that's the only thing that I care about. I care about what this regime does because it's what they ask their players to do, year in and year out, is what we expect to see on the field. And so we don't have those problems. We've never had those problems. All right, in today's poll, who's the better running back? Gibbs, 90%. Yeah, that's slightly biased, isn't it? That's slightly biased. All right, what do we got up next? I am curious about something real quick. Let me pull up. I gotta pull up the combine results. Just thinking about wide receiver here for a moment. I'm curious. All right. In this year's combine, where is he? Not even on the first page. Carnell Tate, likely to be the number 1 receiver taken in this draft. Ran a 4.53. The number 2 wide receiver in this draft potential. Like, I think that Denzel Boston should be up there. I like Denzel Boston and Omar Cooper both, but when I look at their profiles, the film that I've watched, totally 2 different players, right? One's 6 foot, one's like 6'4". But Omar Cooper just has a way of separating. But he ran a 4.42. Omar Cooper Jr. ran a 4.42. Chris Brassel, the second. Another player that I feel like is underrated by a lot of people. Underrated. 6'4", 198, 32 and 3/8 inch arms, man. He's prototypical X receiver. And I feel like he's underrated by a lot. Like I said, he ran a 4.37. 4.37. He might be one of the more exciting players in this draft this year. I wouldn't be surprised if he slips. Who gets him? I was trying to find, where's I don't think Malachi Lemon. I don't think he tested. Malachi Fields, though, he's another prototypical X receiver. Probably a day 2 guy. He ran a 4.61. 4.61. He's 6'4 and a half, 218, 32 and an eighth inch arms. Played at Notre Dame. I mean, late day 2, early round 3, probably on Brad's board. Where is Malachi? Yeah, he didn't test. Point again is he's supposedly running somewhere between a 4.42 and a 4.49 is Makai Lemon. So the top players in this year's draft class, top receivers, in this year's draft class, it should be going first, second round. Outside of Zachariah Branch, small guy, 5'9", and Chris Brazel, well, maybe Skylar Bell even. Outside of those 3 players, everyone else ran that tested and didn't test but have known times, ran slower than a 4.41. And the best players like Cardinal Tate, 4.45 or 4.43. So again, look, it proves itself to me year in and year out. The work that I do, it's not to piss people off. The work that I do is rooted in fact. It's based on statistical analysis. And then you just have to go and look at the routes that are run by the players that are doing it in the NFL. You have to go look at how they're successful, right? Why are they so successful? Why do the Lions have to stick with a player when statistically, analytically, and historically speaking, the players that are having a bigger impact on teams today are not fast? Like 4.5 is fast, don't get me wrong. But they're not burners, man. They're just not. And there's a reason for that. There's a reason for that. Yes, D Sports says Nick Fairley, but things were different. Oh, yeah, you're talking about the whole weight thing? Yeah, I mean, look, different era of football, too. Totally different. You have to look at sports science today. I mean, the last decade of sports science is, I mean, generations ahead of where it was in the 2000s, right? 2000 to 2010. This last, or 2015 to 2000, decades ahead, right? Generations ahead of where we were. Sports science is crazy today. Yeah, different time. We've never had issues like that. Never had issues. Okay, players that could be drafted. Take a quick break. Give my voice a rest. We'll be right back here in a few moments. Other players that could be traded and focus for the Lions. Possible draft day trades. There's a couple. All right, today's episode is brought to you by Zyn, and your body deserves more than just hydration. Make sure you guys check out Zyn today. The link will be attached. If you look right below where it has the show title, you can find the area to tap on Zyn. Of course, this channel makes a very, very small commission when you do. Look, everyone is looking for a safe, natural way to accelerate their recovery, restore your health, promote long-term wellness, and when you drink Zyn, you're tapping into thousands of years of natural healing through inflammation-combating properties of turmeric. All this in one pack. Look, I couldn't believe it either, but vitamin D, vitamin C, turmeric, of course, your electrolytes, and zinc. Zyn has a couple of different ways you can put this all inside your system today. Pre-made drinks, and if you're on the go, the pre-mixed packets all make life easy. Each Zyn drink includes 100% of your vitamin C, D, and zinc to fit your daily needs. And if you're diabetic or you're counting calories, no added sugars in the ready-made drink mix. Only 2 grams of added sugar in the drink mix packet. And then, of course, you get 4 flavors: strawberry yuzu, mango, pomegranate, passion fruit lemonade, blackberry dragon fruit, and, of course, trusted by athletes all over the world. Just to name a few: Roquan Smith, Dante DiVincenzo, Arik Armistead, and Ty Jerome. So however you guys enjoy your Zyn, you can find it all over the country, Meijer, Amazon, but click the link below. Go right to the dedicated source, and that is Zyn.com. Thank you very much to Zyn for being a sponsor of today's show. All right. Up next, take a jump over to the Vikings here for a moment. Kind of continue on with the DFJ Sports report. As reported a couple of days ago, the Vikings are not looking to make any front office changes. So they're not even going to start the GM search before this year's draft. Now, if you remember, Kwesi Adolfo was let go, and the Vikings are currently searching for a new general manager. I'm surprised it's taken them this long to find a new GM, but the interim role is been filled by Rob Brzezinski until they find someone new, which... Who's picking the players this year? That's what I don't understand. Who's picking the players? Is this all Kevin O'Connell? Like does he get to have the most or the biggest voice in the room when it comes to this year's draft for the Vikings? It's kind of interesting, right? The biggest question is this going to be good business or bad business for the Vikings? This could blow up in their face. Or, if this draft doesn't work out, then does that mean that like Kevin O'Connell is going to be on the outs? You know, are they going to blame him for everything? I don't know, man. Seems kind of weird that they haven't gone out to find a new GM and have taken this long to do something about it. Now, there was a report the other day saying that there could be more trades in this draft. Look, I got to tell y'all, I mean, I hear the rumors, right? And then I hear where they're coming from. There's not one iota of a rumor that is actually true, because rumors are rumors, right? They're fake, of intel that is true that says that there's going to be any trades, period, for teams moving up in this draft. There has been 0 confirmed rumors, if you will, of the Lions being interested in doing anything in this draft when it comes to trading players, or trading for players, and or moving up. Now, it doesn't make a ton of sense to move up in this draft unless you're looking for a very specific player for your team. And even then, I think that that's going to involve way too much draft capital that Brad is going to be comfortable with parting with. for him to get into the top 10 this year, I think it's more likely to cost this year's second round pick, and he's not going to do that. There's no way that I could see Brad getting rid of a second round pick to move up and just to end up with one player in this draft. Because anything after that, you're at 118 or 108, wherever we're at, like slim pickings. All depth guys, major projects. If we don't have 3 picks inside the top 75 in this draft, it's going to be tough sledding. It really is, as far as being happy with how this draft went. So I would say that Brad moving up makes a lot less sense. I like even for Francis Maui-Goa or Maui Noah, even Monroe Freeling. This has been, I guess, speculated to go in the top 15. Caden Proctor to go in the top 15. I don't look moving into 15 or 16, or 14. That's a different story. That's going to cost you a 4th round pick. Maybe a future 4th to go along with it just to sweeten the pot. But typically a 4th round pick just to move a couple of spots. That's still a lot of draft cap to move forward. But compared to, seasons past, I see where a lot of teams want to move back. And that's the intel that I have, is that they want to move back. The problem is everybody wants to move back in this draft. Everybody. And I think that's going to be the problem. So the expectation among the NFL teams is that the 2026 draft will be one of the more trade-heavy drafts in recent memory, according to multiple league sources, specifically on the defensive side of the ball at edge, corner, and linebacker. They're all strong or deep. I disagree. While wide receiver is typically considered to be the most talented offensive position, that was shared by Jordan Schultz. And I think Jordan Schultz is completely wrong here. I do. Edge, it's great up front. You have 2 or 3 decent to great players. And I have some information on Reese. I should probably share right after this. But after that, you got a lot of depth. And we went through the edge the other day, and I think that it was safe to say the edge class, even though it's deep with depth, it's not deep with blue chips. It's not deep with day one starters. You have a lot of guys that are going to, give you some snaps, yes, but you're not looking at game changers, from day one. There's going to be a draft gem somewhere, but highly unlikely that you're going to find multiple in this class. And as far as cornerback, I don't think that this is a very deep corner. That there might be a lot of corners, but I don't think it's a deep cornerback draft when you're looking for immediate help, past the second round. I don't think that there's immediate help in the linebacker class. Definitely not deep. I just, this linebacker class is not exciting when you get past Reese or Sonny Styles. It's just not exciting. It's not exciting. There's a couple of players, and even then, I would probably almost rather see Brad Holmes trade for an outside linebacker, and I don't see that happening either. I really don't. I'll get the recent information to you in just a second. So the Vikings also were talking about Caden Proctor potentially going to Minnesota. I'm going to read what they said. Let me just bring this in. Let's just read what they said about him. This might be the only article source that does this. Fix it. All right. So they were talking about Caden Proctor. When scouting offensive linemen, they go on to say here that it's not hard to be naturally drawn to the star rating they had coming out of high school. You can excuse some of the bad habits because of their potential, but it's vital that NFL teams be wary of this and focus on the player and not the helmet. And that means the school, right? Like, you can't be focused on names, just like you can't be focused on what school they went to. Like, for instance, it seems like every year Lions fans, all they care about are the biggest names in free agency, are the biggest names at the trade deadline. They forget about the substance of the NFL very, very often. So here they talk about the case with Caden Proctor, who is touted by many as one of the better offensive tackle prospects in this class. But are we sure? Let's talk about it. Proctor, former 5-star recruit out of Southeast Polk High School in Des Moines, Iowa, helped anchor a state title during his tenure. He would originally commit to Iowa before flipping to Alabama. He would start all 13 games as a freshman, earning all SEC freshman honors. After Nick Saban retired, he technically transferred to Iowa for 3 whole months before returning to the Crimson Tide. This is nothing new. I think I have something similar written on my DetroitFootballJournal.com. For a player of his size, well, look at that, 352 pounds. Why do people keep saying he's 366? Like, I just listened to, who was it last night? Not Garofolo. It was the other guy that wears glasses. But he kept saying that Proctor was 370 pounds and he was drafting him to the Lions. Like, no, he's not. He's absolutely not. Caden Proctor tested very well at the combine, 32.5-inch vertical, 109-inch broad jump. Great numbers for any lineman, let alone someone with Proctor's build. What they forgot to mention here, this is a record. That is a new combine record. So for all the people out there saying that they're worried about this guy's weight and yada, 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 he just set a record for all linemen over 350 pounds. He's got an anchor on him, and when he drops it, power rushers aren't going anywhere. And that's the biggest thing, man. If you let anybody get inside you, typically as an offensive lineman, that's not good. But when you get inside Caden, you don't go anywhere. Strong hands paired with thick base make him a definition of a road grader in the run game, which is where he excels. He's a monster on power run plays, which is what the Lions are going to be focused on, which is also an Alabama specialty. NFL teams will love his 3 years of SEC starting experience. I do, especially compared to somebody like, let's see, Monroe Freeling. I think he only has 18 games of starting experience. Not enough for me. Maybe this is just a matter of personal preference, but I don't love that Proctor committed to the same school twice and then left them high and dry. Well, who cares? Just might not show a massive level of commitment. No, the commitment issue was Saban retired, right? And Proctor had a rough freshman year. And so he was considering going back to home, right? To go back home. And so then he said, you know what? Nah, I'm going back to Bama. I'm going to finish this out. The biggest red flag with Proctor is how poorly he looks in pass pro. I don't know what they're talking about. The guy's only let up, 2 sacks in the last 2 years? He's a roller coaster of a blocker in pass pro, with some snaps being great and others looking like he's learning the position. Footwork is sloppy, kickback is choppy, and he gets way too narrow when set. Also worth noting is the conditioning concerns. He got up to 370 pounds this season, and it showed in his tape as he struggled mightily early on in this season. I think that this is false. Footwork, kickback, definitely not choppy and sloppy. Definitely not. Caden Proctor will have just turned 21 and training camp gets underway. There's a lot of time for him to really develop. However, there are just a few too many red flags for me to warrant a good grade. Proctor is much further down on my board than most, earning him an early 3rd round grade. Okay, who wrote this? Because he's going to get put on blast. Garrett Burrows. Let's clip this guy. Here, clip. There you go. I'm going to put him on blast when Proctor goes in the 1st round. 3rd round grade. Gotta be kidding me. So I'll leave it up to you. What's your grade on Caden Proctor? 3rd round? Okay. Yeah, I think Peter, like if we were to trade away this year's first round pick, I think that would be a massive mistake, like completely trading it away. But I think trading back is smart, depending on who's available. And as far as trading away future draft picks, we haven't done that very often, and we've gotten picks back in most cases, or Brad will get those picks back in most cases. The only thing that he traded away this year was 2 third-round picks, which they weren't worth much. And honestly, when you look at it, this is the problem that I have. When we look at draft to draft to draft, I think because not everybody has the time to go through everything, and they don't have, the time or the resources to watch a bunch of film and really study all of these prospects. I think what happens is fans, and I was guilty of this years ago, you think that, okay, it's the draft. We're going to be able to go get some really good football players. And being a Lions fan, prior to doing any of this, more full-time than I, now than I ever was before, right? I never considered the actual class itself, right? I never considered how each class is different. And there's no two classes that are the same. And some classes just don't have the studs. They just don't. And we've seen that a lot more recently. And I think a lot of that I've said many times, COVID was a big reason why. And that was simply because players took 2 years more of eligibility than they didn't have before. That's why we're seeing older players in the draft now. And then when they didn't take the 2 years of eligibility and they still came out as a junior and they only had a year's worth of playing experience, well, that really showed up, right? You have a year's worth of playing experience and now you need 2 to 3 years of development in the NFL before you're going to be somebody. And that might be on your second contract with another team. But you still got to draft somebody. What are the Lions going to do? Not draft anybody? Well, they had to draft somebody. So I think that, we fall, some people fall victim to that. That they think that, every draft is good, and it's just not. It's just not. This year is such a double-edged sword. You have a pretty deep class for depth in a lot of different areas. And as far as true blue chip, dominant football players, there's so few of them. There's so few. And there's, like I said, there's going to be some diamonds. But trading away future draft capital, I think you kind of have to have a good idea of what's in that draft. And so I'll leave you with this on that thought. Brad knew what was going to be in this draft in the third round. He knew. He had a great idea that he knew what was going to be there. And he probably felt comfortable saying, this is not a draft that I really want to be picking in the third round. And I'm going to give away that third round pick. Now, could he have used those picks to move forward? Sure could. But Tesla was worth it. 1,000%. He was at least a second round grade, probably by Brad's board. And by giving up a third round pick that was worth a fourth round pick, and then another third round pick that was worth a fourth round pick, and then you swapped the third round pick. He only gave up 2 third round picks that weren't worth squat. So tail end of the third round in this draft is everything disappears, man. I mentioned this word the other day with Jeff Dean. I called it the drop zone. Between pick 75 and like 130 in this draft. Or I'm sorry, it was pick 78 and 130 in this draft. It's just it's a drop zone. Like, you're going to be reaching for a lot of players. And when you look at the players of need for the Lions versus BPA, what are you going to take? Receivers? What else are you going to take between those two areas? Like, there's just not, unless a lot of players fall, there's just not a great amount of football players in that neighborhood. There's just not. you're going to reach. You're going to reach for sure. Now, they won't be that way for every other team. But I think for the Lions, it will be. It will be. I don't think you're going to have any issue with Blake Miller at the end of the first round. He'll be there. He'll be there. K-Biz wants to know, can we pool together the 4s and get up to the 3rd, or swap firsts with Buffalo, give them a 4th and get a 3rd in return? Okay. I think I know what you're saying. Trade down with Buffalo and then get a 3rd in return. Is that what you're saying? So, a couple of things here. Rather be fishing, Fred says, I read a draft board by NFL draft analyst that said that he has Fano going to Detroit to replace the right bookend in Taylor Decker. Maybe they meant right tackle in replacing Taylor Decker. You know, because if you're considering still that the Lions are still moving Sewell to the left, there was one that I listened to last night that said absolutely you take Caden Proctor, you don't move Sewell. You take Caden Proctor, Sewell stays on the right. If you take Caden Proctor, he's going to be your left tackle. And I would agree with that. But I think it also depends on where you have to feel Proctor out at practice too, you know, very early in OTAs, and just see how everything's working for him. Look, I'm not saying that Proctor's not going to take a year to develop. All players will. I think their second year, especially as an offensive lineman, that is probably the most impactful, you know, jump for them is year 1 to year 2. And then anything after that is just gravy, man. Caden Proctor in year 3 is going to be just crushing it as long as he stays healthy. But even in year 2, I think he's going to have a significant jump. So it depends on where you put him. You know, I think that you put him at right, he's going to do just fine. You put him at left, I think he's going to do just fine. But maybe the Lions want their for sure thing, that they think that, you know, Sewell could be the for sure thing at the left. That, you know, starting that way just makes more sense. But let me get back to these trades here. Yes, I do. Precision staining. Ask the question. Do you think Brad is taking account of the next draft quality and talent of players when he trades future capital? Yes, I do believe that. I think you have to take that into consideration. Peter, yeah, I've been vocal on Kenyon Sadiq. You can't pass on him. If Kenyon's there at 17 and all the offensive linemen that you really had high in this draft are gone, you definitely take him. Yeah, Precision, to get back to you, you have to take that into consideration. But at the same time, I wouldn't be surprised if Brad just said, you know what, we really like that player, so it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. We just wanted that player, regardless of the draft. And so he probably does consider it, but at the same time, if they really want a player, they're going to go get a player. And that's probably what matters most importantly right now. We worry about how to replace those picks or find different, you know, players the next year. They'll figure a way to do that. And I would say both of those things are true. I would think both of those things play a factor. But you have some sort of an idea of each draft before this draft, right? You have some sort of an idea when you're making a trade in a draft. What am I potentially losing out next year? Because even next year, look, you still have to go through a whole nother season. You don't know what's going to happen with injury. You still have to go through the whole process, and you don't know what's going to happen with a lot of those players. You know, for instance, what did I say in December? I said, watch these draft boards and look at these players that are ranked in the 50s, in the 60s, and watch how they fly up these boards. And I named a few. Caden Proctor was one. I said, watch him fly up this board. And what happened? About a week ago, all of a sudden, in the 4.0s, the 5.0s, the 6.0s, everyone has Caden Proctor jumping like 20 spots. And now he's up in the 15s, the 16s, the 17s. Well, gee. I mean, I only saw that coming a mile away. Right? But I told y'all, clip it, save it, remember it, because it's going to happen. It happens every year. But I picked on a few players because I felt like those players had the biggest opportunity this year. Players that I really liked when I watched their film. I thought that they were artificially suppressed for some reason. And I intentionally feel like if the other draft analysts that have been doing this for a long time, a lot longer than me, do what I do, I'm not saying I lie to you about my early rankings, but I'm not going to give you everything. Because either I need to watch more film on certain players, or I got to hold some things back. But at the same time, I don't hold everything back. It's usually just a case that I haven't been through enough film yet. So some things change. But for people that do this every day, and that's all they focus on is the draft, then theirs should be spot on from day one. The first one they drop shouldn't change a whole lot if they've really watched all that film. And then after the combine, it should change one more time. That's really it. Let me go back to this trade idea. Hold on here. Where was that trade idea? Use later round picks to move up. Keep our first 4 picks alone. Use our double picks to move up. Okay, so let's talk about trades. We got about 20 minutes before Brad Holmes is going to get on. Let me get that up. Make sure I've got it ready. Can't wait to hear what he's got to say today. All right, let me pull something out. We'll just use, I guess we use over the caps chart for now. There, that should be big enough, right? And then I got to pull out a sheet here. So I've saved some of these drafts that you're talking about, these draft day trades. I have a whole sheet of analysis on it. Not all of them, but I have a lot. All right, so let's talk trades. A lot of people are interested in trades, so I want, you tell me right now, what trades are you interested in? Where do you want to move? Where do you want to be? Where do you want to move? Where do you want to be? What picks do you feel are the most important? And let's talk about it with some actual knowledge, right? Some facts. If we're talking, I'll start with pick 50. Okay, I think that if the Lions were to do anything, moving up ahead, up with pick 50 makes the most sense. So trading to move ahead into the 30s would make a ton of sense for them. And I think that could start with potentially moving back off 17. Now, if you're thinking, okay, I want to keep, I gotta pull something else open. Hold on. Lions have 17, 50, 118, 128. And I would say at pick 17 and 50, you're going to find some decent players, right? 118 and 128, those picks suck. So everything after that, as far as value goes, right? Value picks there, it really is terrible. If you don't care about value, if you don't care about the stupid grades that PFF gives you on your draft, you care about the player, which is what I care about, then you're going to find some players at 118 and 128. You're going to reach according to, some of the other mocks, but I could care less. But I would say that in this draft, I want the Lions to have 4 picks in the top 80. We'll go with that. 4 picks in the top 80. How do we get there? Right? How do we get there? So based on your mocks and what you guys have done, you tell me where is it that you want the Lions to be picking? What do you think makes the most sense? I have the chart up here so that we can actually do this. All right, so pick 17 is worth 1,564 points. Pick 50 is worth, where is it? 1018. 118 is worth 582. And this chart's way different than other charts. 128 is worth 541. All right, so realistic trades. If the Lions wanted to move from 17 to 14, you're going to pick swap 17 and 14, and that is going to cost you a 4th round pick. Okay, we're moving up 3 spots. That is going to cost you a 4th round pick. And when you look at this year's draft order in the 4th round, that's going to be 118 or 128. And I'm almost willing to bet that if the Lions want to move up 3 spots, that's going to be 118. If the Lions wanted to move, let's say up to number 11, 17 to 11. Well, that's going to cost you a pick swap, right? Pick swap, and then you're probably looking at a 3rd and a 4th. And from a 3rd perspective, I'm saying like, I mean, you could probably do a late 3rd and a late 4th to make it happen, or a late 3rd and probably a late 3rd and a mid 4th. So we don't have a 3rd. So that's probably 118. And then 2027 3rd. And even then, you're probably kicking in, because remember, next year's draft, those numbers are not rated the same. So let's look at number 11 here. This worth 1785. And you're going to give up 118, which is worth 582. You're going to give up number 17, which is worth 1564. So the other team is already way ahead, right? That's 2,000. What is that? 2,126 points. I'm doing math in my head, so it could be off. 2,000. Let's see, 146. So you're thinking, well, damn, you're already 440 points. You're giving up 440 points. But next year's 3rd round, that you don't have, right, to make that trade happen, that pick's only worth about 50 to 60 to 70%. So they may not go for that because it's the next year's third and you're giving up a fourth this year to move up multiple spots. So I would say at a minimum to go to 11, you're looking at 118, a 2027 third, and then you're probably going to throw in a fifth. $157 maybe. And if Brad really has his way, 181. So let's just throw 181 in there. So a pick swap at 17 for 11, and you're going to give up 118, 181, and a 2027 third round pick to move up 6 spots. You're going to give up another future third round pick to make that happen. Now, this is based on reality, right? Because in 2022, the Saints moved up from 16 to 11, and they pick swapped 16 for 11. They didn't get anything else in return other than 11. They gave up a third round pick that year and a fourth round pick that year. Well, like I said, the Lions don't have a third, so they'll have to give up a fourth and a fifth this year and next year's third to make it happen. It's pretty realistic. I would absolutely draft Vega at 17. Absolutely. If you want the two best guards in this league, that you would absolutely do that. Vega's not going to push to the outside, but Vega can also become a future center, and there's a lot of upside to him becoming probably the best center to play the game. So give him some time at guard, let him learn the game, and then get him some snaps at center, and then maybe a flip-flop. Cade Mays and Vega at center, to guard at some point. What else? Give me some trades here. Cleveland is one of my bigger trade options. Mike P, I'm right there with you too. I think Cleveland, there's some opportunity there. When you look at trades, look, I'll give you the Nuggets. I'm sure a lot of you know this already. But the teams that have multiple first round picks, the teams that have multiple second and third round picks, those are the teams that are the biggest trade bait. They have more to offer and they have more picks to offer, which lessens the blow for them. So Jets, Browns, who else? Jets, Browns. Is it Dolphins? I think I'll have multiple day ones. Chiefs. But I would say Dolphins, Browns, Jets are my three teams that I'm looking for the Lions to trade with. And the Cardinals. I think that there could be a potential with the Cardinals again too. What else? So if the Lions wanted to move from... Well, let me give you another scenario. So I was saying 17 to 11. Even back in 2019, the Steelers went from 20 to 10. They selected Devin Bush, and they traded a second round pick and then a 2020 third round pick. So kind of what I was just saying for the Lions going 17 to 11. 17 to 11. I said a third and a fourth. Well, just going one more pick north from 20 to a 20 to 10, it was a second round pick value. That year's second and next year's third. I don't see the Lions doing that. I don't see the Lions giving up 50 and then a third round pick next year to make that happen. So if Brad can swing a trade before the draft to grab a third round pick, I think that would be great. But the reason why he's not going to do that, unless there's a player trade, is because you don't know who's going to be available with that third round pick. And so those trades usually don't happen. You don't see a lot of teams trading before the draft to say, hey, you know what? I just want to be picking in the third, so I'm just going to make a trade with the team for a third round pick. You would be, I mean, the value, right, of what's there may not be good. And so for a team that you're trading with, if their value for players that they need are not on the board there or in the next 5 or 6 picks, they may not value that pick as much during the trade, but before the trade, higher value. You're going to lose more as the team wanting that pick. Good point, K-Biz. Value's just not there. There's not a lot of can't miss players. There's just not. So what are the trades? We've talked about 17 to 14, 17 to 11. Okay, how do we add another second round pick? Or in this case, what if the Lions wanted to trade back? I think that's how you do it, is you trade back to add value, right? You trade back to add value. Before I do that, let's talk about moving forward. Now, the Lions are picking at 50. And I'm thinking, okay, what is it going to take the Lions to go from 50 to 35, right? 50 to 35. Well, if we look at last year's draft, the Seahawks pulled out the ultimate trump card, man. The wild card. They went up and grabbed Nick Emanawore at pick 35. They traded with the Titans and they gave up pick 82. Cost them a third round pick. The Lions don't have a third round pick, so they're kind of in a pickle. So for the Lions to go from 50 to pick 35, I would say that that's going to be 118. And you're probably looking at 118, a 2027 third. To make that trade happen. I'm good with that. I don't like losing 118. But I think that picking at 17 and 35 is going to be much more valuable to the Lions. Because at 35, you could get that offensive lineman that you didn't take at 17. At 35, you can get that edge that you didn't take at 17. At 35, you could get the defensive tackle that you may like that is not there at 17. And at 17, that may be a bit early to take a defensive tackle too, right? And at 35, I think that's where you find Caleb Lomu. So if you are not wanting to take Caleb Lomu in the first round, that's where you pick them, is at 35. And so at 17, that leaves you more windows of opportunity to find yourself a linebacker too early. All right. An edge, possibly, but I think that it's too early. Unless all of the other edge players have not moved, then, which would be wild. That's not going to happen. Which reminds me, I got to pause real quick. We got Brad Holmes coming up here in just a minute. I forgot to give you the information on Arvell Reese. Let me pause for just a brief minute. I want to talk about Arvell Reese for a moment. As soon as I can find my camera. There it is. Okay. Arvell Reese has been one of the most polarizing players in this draft. The versatility, his capability. I mean, he's quite literally a dual player, edge, linebacker. Yes, he can do it all. But this is what I learned about Arvell Reese over the weekend. Arvell Reese said that he never trained specifically at the edge position. And they have this this move that they call like a crossover double chop or something like that he just made up the name later. That he never had a name. He just kind of did it. And so in this game, I forget even what game it was, but in this game, he did this cross double chop move, and I guess it kind of worked. It didn't even look like much, to be honest with you. It didn't look like much at all. But turn it into something later, right? He kept working at it. But Arvel Reese said that he never trained specifically for edge. And so when he was asked to go in and do things as an edge defender, he just had to make it up on scene. And I thought to myself, okay, that's interesting. No specific edge training last year or the year before. And you are one of the best linebackers in this draft. Hold on, I gotta leave a message real quick. You are one of the best linebackers in this draft. This kind of changes things for me with Arvel Reese at the top of my board. I still believe that he is one of the best players in the draft without a doubt. But I no longer have him, or I guess should I say have him as the number one edge, right? I wouldn't have him as the number one edge now. I think that belongs to David Bailey solely. And that makes me also question on where he goes. How early does he go? Because if he doesn't have a definitive pass rush plan or training, right, at pass rush, then you're bringing in a raw guy as an edge, or are you bringing in a raw guy to be a linebacker and then you move him into the edge position on certain plays? And I think that you use that duality that he has, right? I think that you use that duality. So he can be off ball as a linebacker on certain plays, and then on third down, you could move him up towards the line of scrimmage. And I think that makes a lot of sense for Arvel Reese. But he's not a pure edge rusher in this class. He's not. So very interesting information there on Arvel Reese. I think it does change things for where he goes. And I think that David Bailey is probably now my first choice to go to the Jets, where he wasn't before. He wasn't before. Let's see here. Trying to get Brad all set up here. One sec. Should be coming up here in just a couple of minutes. We'll watch it live. We'll do some commentary. We'll break it down, take some notes. What do you think he's going to talk about today? And how many times do you think he's going to be asked about edge? If I was a drinking man, I would say that you'd probably be on the floor pretty quickly. I can almost guarantee someone with initials JM is going to ask him about edge. I can almost guarantee it. All right, while we wait for that to pop up, you know how they're always on time. No, they're not. They're not always on time. But while we're waiting for that to pop up, I think I have it muted too, so it won't just automatically cut me off. Let's continue to talk about trades. Yeah, depending on how it falls. I believe Miller could be there at 35 too, but man, there is such a big difference between Miller and Lomu and Freeling. I've heard Freeling get the Taylor Decker comparison from size and athleticism, coming out of Ohio State. I just Freeling, I like him as a player. I would not be mad if the Lions drafted him. I just feel like his anchor is just, it's soft. He gets beat by power. And I don't want a guy on the left side that's going to get beat by power. I don't. I want a guy on the left side that can handle the power. You don't have to necessarily, just focus on your run game. The Lions don't use, or maybe will not use, as much outside zone. You run to your strength anyway. You know what? What's stopping the Lions from just throwing Penei Sewell on the left side every now and again? And moving, whoever to the right side every now and again. Why not? Why not confuse the shit out of a defense and just move your tackles around? I would. I don't know why they haven't. And then you go run behind Sewell on one play, and then he goes back to the other side, and then you go run to the left side again. And then the next time Penei goes to the left side, they think that you're going to run to the left side. You run to the right. You know what I mean? Like, mix it up that way. I would love to see that. All right. Anyway, continue on with trades. Okay, so let's say the Lions want to move, like I said, 50 to 35. It's going to be a third. It's a second and a third. So let me back that up. Let me back this up. I had that all wrong. That's going to be pick 50. It's going to be pick 50, and since the Lions don't have a third, I'll probably go with I'll probably go with $181 and then a 2027 third. I think I should just do an article on this, my trade predictions, and a video. I think I'll do a whole thing on this today. Promise I'll get it done. I just haven't felt great the last couple weeks, so. All right, so what if the Lions want to move back and just add a pick? Right? What if they want to move back and add a pick? So if you're looking at the top of the board, you're looking at previous trades. Again, we'll go in reverse order. So if the Lions want to move back, then you have to look at teams that have moved up or vice versa. And there's not a ton of trades like this. But the one that pops out is Marcus Davenport, and that was, number 14 to number 27. So what if we go 17 to 27? Right? What would the Lions get in compensation this year? Well, you're going to get 27. You're going to get a first round pick next year in 2027. And then you're probably going to get or give up probably a fourth this year. So you're going to move back to 27 and gain a future first round pick. But that doesn't help you in this draft. Right? Because if you get an extra fourth or a fifth round this year, well, the only way that helps you is if and then you take then what would be 3 fourth round picks, or 2/4 and a 5th and move up into the 3rd or the 2nd, right? And I think that's where I don't know that I would want to do that. Would you want to add another first round pick to 2027 and not get anything for this year of moving back and taking all of that risk of not getting the player that you really fall in love with? Or if the Lions have 10 or 11 first round draft grades, maybe they're okay with that. Maybe they're just, well, you know what? We're going to roll the dice. We're going to get what we get. We're not going to throw a fit. We're just going to add that extra second round or that second first round pick to next year, because then what can they do? Then they could take that first and they could package it up with something else and they could find themselves in the second round again. And I think when you look at teams that, you know, that could be willing to do that, there might be a couple. All right, so what if the Lions just want to move back, let's say 3 picks, and they go, you know, number 17 to 21 with the Steelers. So they move back. Then you're probably looking at the pick swap, so you're going to get 21. And then you're looking at probably a mid-second. And then a 2027 third if it is a mid-second. And that I'm good with. You get that mid-second, so what teams would that be? Right? What teams would that be? Let's take a look at the second round. That could be the Jets at 44. Could absolutely be the Jets at 44. Nope, I'm sorry. I meant Steelers. Where's the Steelers at? Steelers at 53. So then if you have picks 50 and 53, could you then take pick 50 and then package that up to get up into the 36 area, 35 area, and then you're going to add in a 4th, 50 and a 4th to move up to 36. That's exactly what I would do. So you're going to trade back. You're then going to take that mid-second round pick. You're going to package a 4th round pick with it, and then you're going to move back up into the mid-30s. I think that makes a ton of sense. The question is, who's going to trade with you? Right? People have to want to trade with you. And the teams that are going to be at the top of the board there, you know, you're looking at the Giants, the Raiders, the Titans, the Cardinals, the Browns. You know, those are the teams that you'd be looking at. Yeah, 27 is a lot deeper when it comes to quarterback for sure. Okay, so the teams that may be interested in a trade like this, you got to maybe look at the other teams that don't have a lot of draft picks. Right? Maybe they don't have a lot of draft picks. So yeah, let's see. Let's see. Man, it is tough finding. All right, so here we go. The Giants. Yeah, this one could be a tough one here, but you know, if you do the Giants, and the Lions package up, let's say 50 and 118, that could equal pick 37. 50 and 118 could be 137. So what does that do for the Giants? They would pick at 5, they would pick at 50, and then they would have 105, 145, and 118. Is Brad on yet? Oh, we got a countdown here. It says still a few minutes to go. All right, who else do we have? All right, how about the Colts? Oh, they only have pick 47. So what if the Colts want to move up? They don't have a first round pick. Yeah, I don't want to move back to 47. I wouldn't do that. No way. All right, the Cardinals. They have 7 picks overall. All right, they have all their natural selections. So if we look at the Cardinals from a trade up perspective, if we wanted 34, Lions would have to give up 50 and probably 128 or 118. And so then that would give them the 3rd overall pick, the 50th pick, the 65th pick, 104, and then 128. So they would gain 2 extra picks. Well, 2 extra picks. No, 1 extra pick. But they wouldn't be picking at 34. And I don't know if they would do that. Unless, I mean, they'd have to really value somebody. Here you go. Here's Brad. Of course, they started late.
Staff or operations.
Unless, they'd have to really value somebody. Here you go. Here's Brad. Of course, they started late.
Staff or operations.
They'd have to really
There's
value
really too many
somebody.
people to name, but
Here you go. Here's Brad. Of course, they started late. Hold on.
staff or operations. There's really too many people to name, but
Here you go. Here's Brad. Jesus. My bad.
it's really too many people to name, but entire personnel department, our coaching staff, our operations, player engagement, everybody just really want to give appreciation for all their hard work that they've done up to this point. Still a little bit more work to do, but really appreciate everything. Questions?
How serious you take every draft, but we was talking to Dan and some of the guys on their ride, and they were saying this year you skipped out on the owners meeting to focus that much more on the draft. So just talk about, what do you feel any pressure or anything to get it right even more, or just to talk about how much more emphasis you're putting on this draft to even skip out and just be that focused and that dialed in?
Well, it was really more so in the past where I've gotten for our process. It's a lot of time that you miss, and so by the time that you get back, you're kind of in I'm kind of in a makeup mode because of all the time that you miss for our process. So that's why I just kind of just said, look, in order for me to kind of try to avoid being in that makeup mode, because now you hop into draft meetings with the scouts and blah, 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 and it just keeps rolling, but you miss a good chunk of time for us. And so that's what went into it. Sure.
We haven't really talked to you since free agency.
Yep.
So can you just add any top line guys? Not that we expected, the biggest cost free agents, but how do you feel like you addressed your needs and filled whatever holes you thought you had?
Yeah, I feel like we did the best we could, and we maximized the resources that we had available, and that's my job to do that, and I think that we accomplished that.
You referred to financial constraints. How do you imagine that evolving over the next couple of years? Like when you look at your cap table, do you kind of feel like you'll be in that place indefinitely, or do you think there's a chance anything changes over the next couple of years in that regard? Look, every single year is different. You just don't know. But yeah, there were some things that we are currently navigating through, but
I do think that they're good problems that we are navigating through. And, I would much rather have the good problems that we have to navigate through, whatever the term I use, financial constraints, whatever it is. But at the end of the day, I think they're good problems. I'd rather have those problems in the other way. But it could change. I don't know what next year's going to bring, but, we'll just but we'll be prepared and we'll adjust.
Red now.
It seemed like you had another follow-up.
Well, I was going to say that, and you also mentioned, the 1 year deals give you a lot of flexibility. I'm just curious, what are some other, strategies or mechanisms that you can use as a GM to, maintain that flexibility outside of 1 year deals?
You mean to just add more of multi-year deals?
No, I'm asking outside of 1 year deal. What are some other strategies that you use to maintain roster flexibility on a year-to-year basis?
Oh, there's a lot of levers that you have at your disposal. You just have to just know when is the right time. You got to be very strategic. You got to be smart when to use those levers. But there's multiple things that you can do from a roster construction standpoint. But again, like I say, each year's different. So there's times where it might make sense to trade a player. It might make sense to trade for a player. It might help you out from a salary standpoint. So every single year is different. But we do a lot of hard work on that stuff on the front end, make sure we're prepared, and we'll adjust accordingly.
Right now that you've done your full evaluations, the team sits at number 17. Do you have 17 first round grades on some of the on the prospects? And just give me your thoughts on the overall class and available and potentially in the first round.
Yeah, we're not there yet in terms of having a absolute count. In terms of we still have some more work to do. In this week for sure. So we're not there yet, but we feel pretty good. I think we'll still be able to get a good player. I do think that this draft is not too much different than what's been in the past probably couple years. But I do feel obviously we're picking higher than we have been in the past. So hopefully that'll put us in position to get a better player.
I've seen some reports in recent weeks that, like national reporters, expect it to be a trade-heavy first round. Are you getting an inclination of that?
I have not. It's probably it's a little so early that action. Usually calls will start to happen, but we haven't gotten to that point yet. But it could be. We'll see.
Brad, the balance in the draft between getting a guy who you think might be impact immediately or more.
What did I tell you guys? I just told y'all that 2 hours ago that there has been zero information flying around on draft day trades. And I know that there's a person that comes on in the morning that has been saying all of those lies. And Brad just again validated it.
Long term. Has that balance changed over the last couple of years as new challenges have presented for your roster?
No, it's a fair question. I always think, because like I've always said, the reason why we always go like the best player available approach is because there is only one draft and the roster is going to change every single year. Every single year is going to be new needs, it's going to be, contracts are going to expire, things are going to happen. So what may not seem as a immediate, I need this right now for this year, that might not be the case for the next year. So that's what's been our approach on that. But there's just times where you might, it lines up. Like I said, maybe the best player is a perceived need, and it lines up that way. It's lined up like that in the past, but that's not always the case.
Brad, you've had some success drafting some players who are injured, like JMO, and obviously you've had some others that have gone the other way, like Hendon. How do you decide how you're going to take an injured player?
Yeah, it depends on what the injury is. It depends on what the injury history has been in the past. Take like JMO, that was, really his first major injury. We felt pretty good about what the injury was and felt pretty good about with where medical advancements are at this point. We felt pretty good about that. The same thing with Hendon. I don't think Hendon, I don't think his injury was the reason of why it didn't work out that way. But yeah, you just got to look at everything. It's just, you just got to feel good about it, but it's case by case for sure.
Things we're seeing with NIL is players staying a little bit longer in college. I'm just curious when it comes to age with the draft. When you're evaluating tape of, say, a 24, 25-year-old, does that have to be a little bit cleaner tape, knowing that you want maybe instant impact, whereas 20, 21-year-old, you can project a little bit, see a little bit? I'm just curious how you approach kind of the age element of the draft that we've seen now older players become.
Yeah, no, and Tim, I think it goes both ways. It depends, what has the tape look like? How consistent has a player been for an older player, older coming out in the draft? So if it's 24, 25 years old, now, first of all, you got to have to start adjusting as well, because like you said, these kids are staying in a much longer time, so you're going to get some older prospects. So maybe certain positions that maturity helps. Sometimes it may be a little bit more of a warning sign, but it is something that we've had adjusted to. I think it's case by case. It just depends on the player, depends on the position. It's a lot of factors that go into it.
One of the topics associated with that is like so many people speculate about, well, he's going to be 30 when a second contract rolls around. Like, how much weight do you put into that?
Yeah, no, you got to be prepared for that because it's real, man. So like, say like, look, you guys 24, 25 years old now, and he's going to be looking at 30, by the time the second contract comes. Okay, so how much longevity it is. Maybe he hadn't played a long time and he doesn't have as much wear and tear, but father time is father time too. So, but you have to look at all of it, and again, it's case by case, but it is real though.
Defensive end, what's your confidence in
Say that one more time.
Right tackle and defensive end, what's your confidence level in Borum and Wanham if those guys, that they can be every down starter types, or do you have to, supplement that in the draft?
Yeah, I mean, I've said in the past, I thought Borum put out good tape this year. I don't foresee that. You don't have a crystal ball, but from what last thing I saw on tape, I do think that he's got starter level ability, and same as Wanham. You're talking about guys that have been starters in the NFL, but just kind of look at where the trend is going, where the arrow is going. The last time they're still young, but we feel good about both of them, so we don't feel like it's we have to supplement them because good.
That you aren't doing a local pro day this year. Just kind of curious why you made that decision.
Yeah, just internally, we just kind of made a decision to kind of just utilize that time for some other things, but still utilize the local visits as well. So we still utilize the local visits, but we're just not. We just made the decision really last summer to do away with a pro day, and we'll see how it goes. If we feel like we missed something by not doing it, then we'll look at it and adjust again.
Not to show your hand too much, but how many offensive tackles do you see in that first round or even in the second round as potential first day starters in this draft?
Man, I think anytime you're dealing with a rookie, I don't care where you draft them at, you're gonna have to be prepared for a little bit of growth period. So it's hard to say. Some guys may be a little bit more ready, but you just never know. So I can't really give you a good answer on that one in terms of day one right now, because anytime you draft a rookie, I think you're going to have to be prepared for some development growth period.
Just a follow-up this year, and
say that one more time.
Positions are deeper than others, and within our other stuff, are you getting an older draft class now overall? Guys staying?
Yeah, I mean, that's just been the nature of, whether it's NIL or, the COVID period starting to come to a close. You're getting more older players. But that it doesn't scare us away from, not picking a player just because he's a little more advanced in age or anything. But yeah, that has been a little bit more prevalent because of both kids staying in school longer, and then, there's still some little trickle down from COVID as well still.
Was it a deep draft, or was this a normal draft compared to other years?
I think it's very similar to the past couple of drafts. When the amount of underclassmen that would enter the draft kind of drastically fell off. So that's why I would compare it to the past couple of drafts.
You open this up every year with
Again, Didn't we just talk about that this morning? And I got people jumping down my throat saying that COVID has nothing to do with this and that these drafts with older players doesn't exist. I just told y'all again this morning. Did Brad listen this morning before he jumped in? Because he just nailed two of the things that we discussed today. Pretty interesting, huh? Might know a few things, about a few things.
Gratitude for your staff. Just wanted to dig a little deeper there with a specific staff member. You promoted Brian Hudspeth 3 years ago, and you go way back, covered kind of the same area of the country for a while. Just curious, I guess you speak a lot in superpowers. You know, what's Brian's superpower in his role?
Yeah, he just has a lot of experience. He's very organized. He's a good evaluator. You know, I used to be, like you mentioned, being out in the Southeast with Hudspeth and kind of seeing the way he goes about his work. You know, as much as scouting is evolving, you still need to have some old school roots, you know, and there's still some grassroots level things that you can't, there's steps you cannot skip basically in the scouting process. And that's what I really appreciate about HUD is HUD's going to make sure that those steps aren't getting skipped because they're critical.
So the process evolved though from year to year. Like, is it like, do you still have the same level of anxiety from the first year, or it just seems like you're making all these different changes? Like, how much has your draft process evolved? Has it gotten better? Like, just going into this year, like kind of your mindset entering this year's draft?
Yeah, I think we've evolved a lot. You know, it's something that we take a long, hard look at after each draft to, you know, see things that we like that we're doing, things that we could tweak, things that we could do better, and implement those things and just see how it goes. But, you know, I think it's important to, first of all, you can't be scared to make those evolutions, but also you got to look back at it and make sure that they were the right things. And there's sometimes where you tried something and you didn't get the results that you really wanted, and, you know, you got to tweak again. So, yeah, we have had a lot of evolution from the first time, but the one thing that has not changed and that has stayed consistent is the film. And, you know, that's first and foremost. That's the reason why we're acquiring these players, is to be good football players. So that part really hasn't evolved. I mean, that part hasn't changed, but we definitely made a lot of evolutions in other areas.
Brad, going back to Brad's question about the offensive tackles for a minute,
yeah.
It does seem like as many as 7 offensive tackles have been projected or mocked to go in the first round.
Mm-hmm.
Just what's your evaluation of the top of the offensive tackle class, and do you guys feel like that's a long-term need for you guys?
I mean, I think anytime you can acquire an offensive tackle that's a good player, you know, I always think, you know, if you look at it like an offensive tackle, or, you know, you call that premium position category, you know, I don't think you can ever really have enough of them. Those guys are hard to find. But, you know, you got to make sure that you get the right one. But, you know, I think there's some good ones, you know, we'll just kind of see how it falls.
What are the positions in your eyes?
What are the premium positions? Well, based on what you guys have always said, no, but I mean, but you guys tell us what the premium positions are, right?
Positions at his question, so I didn't know if you had your own definition of premium positions.
So the positions that we did not draft in 2023, those are the, you know, those are the positions, right?
I mean, I think most people think pass rusher, quarterback, offensive tackle. So I don't know if you align with that. Yeah. Your vision aligns with that.
Yep.
So.
Agree.
At cornerback, I don't know if that's a premium position. How does Terrion's situation play into, you know, any needs or, you know, that you may have or what you may do in the draft?
You know, we've put out statements about that. There's no updates.
With the draft development and re-sign model that you guys have implemented, how much harder is it now, given where you're drafting, because of the success you've had, and also the fact that you've had fewer picks in the top 100 than, say, you did earlier in your tenure?
How does it affect things?
How harder is it to implement that model, the draft development re-sign, when you have fewer picks in the top 100 range?
I mean, it doesn't really pose a challenge in terms of the acquisition of the players. You know, look, there's a lot of different ways that you can navigate with having less picks. Look, you might have a lot of picks, you know, and that might not be the case on drafting in terms of what you trade, what you acquire, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, that's that's kind of what you want. If you can get a good football player that ends up fitting the vision that you had, and he makes it to where he's earned a second contract, that's really what you want. But that doesn't always affect it. But it doesn't affect like whether you have more picks or less picks. That model that we have used in the past, I don't see that changing with the amount of picks we'll have.
I'm sorry, Brad, that drafting.
And then as the defense is currently constituted,
Yep.
Are you confident that it's championship level at this stage? As the defense is.
Yeah, I mean, those are our hopes. That's look, we're never going to be satisfied in terms of where we're at. And that's what me and Dan are always constantly looking at. Man, we're always constantly looking at personnel and how to add more and tweaks and like all this stuff. Certainly from a schematic standpoint, that's more of a Dan question. But I know that we're looking at that all the time. So whatever you're saying, like how it looks right now at this day, then that may not be the case, because we're always looking to add and evolve it and make it better all the time.
The drafting challenge for you early on.
The drafting challenge?
Drafting challenge for you, how it's evolved over the year. Early on, you could take anybody, any position. You needed everything.
Yeah.
It's gotten more specific, and I assume more difficult as it goes on. Do you feel at this stage even more pressure to target what appears to be specific needs?
Not really. Actually, I think sometimes you can get in trouble by doing that, just because you might start to reach for a certain player because you feel like you need that position, and you never want to feel that way when you select a player. You pass up a really good player that you liked even more, but there is a question mark on your roster, so you just go ahead and you get that player that you weren't as excited about. It's hard to sleep at. I know for me, it's hard to sleep at night when you do that, when you don't really get the player that you really, really wanted because you reach for a need. And if that you already reached for it, so you already reached for a player that you weren't as fired up, but he fit a certain position. And then what if the player shows or demonstrates the reason why you weren't as fired up about him? So now you've reached for the guy, and now the guy's not even performing up to standards, the same reason why you had a reservation about him. Now you're really in trouble. So that's why I think you got to be careful with that.
You have done that before, reaching which you regretted?
No. Not that I can remember.
Just
are you saying that I have?
Well, no, you said you hate that feeling when you.
Oh yeah, I just know, like we've never done that, but I can only imagine, like that's a hard, like you can't take a player that you're not fired up about because he plays a certain position, and then the reason why you weren't fired up about him, he shows that on the field. And that's why you had reservation for him. And so now you got the double whammy, So no, we haven't done that. We only take players that we're really excited about.
Brad, organizationally, if there was a player out there, obviously not a quarterback, who you thought could put you over the top, even though there's no guarantee get to the Super Bowl, would you, for lack of a better term, F the picks, go all in, whatever word you want to use? If you guys felt that there was a guy out there that would, in your mind, pretty close guarantee get to the Super Bowl?
Absolutely. Yeah, if it's the right guy, yeah. I mean, you guys know me. I feel like you guys get mad at me sometimes. I do that too much sometimes. But no, if we have that kind of conviction for a player, absolutely. We're gonna go and get him.
Just two housekeeping things. The fifth-year options, have you picked those up on those two guys yet? Or if not, I assume you will, but will you?
We haven't yet, but we've already had discussions about it. Yep, about both of them.
And then Ruben Bain, the story came out yesterday that he was involved in a fatal accident. I don't know if that was something you knew ahead of time. Do you have to do more research on that? What do you think the chances are that maybe he's available to you at 17 after that report?
We've known that for a while, so that doesn't really change anything from our standpoint.
Thanks, Brad.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
All righty then. Okay. You know, I have lost so much confidence. So much confidence in media today. And let me just start from back to front. And I should probably go back and re-listen to some of this stuff because I was typing and not listening to some of it. But we'll start with Ruben Bain. Number one. The fact that you would even have to ask a GM, what impact does Ruben Bain have on your draft process, whatever the question was, because he was involved in a fatal accident in 2024, I believe is when it was. Do you really think that they didn't know that? One, back when it happened, because the scouts were looking at these players back then. Two, these teams are given, I mean, a book of information on every player. Thousands of pages of data, which is now obviously condensed into a digital format. So how would they have not have known that? That would be a tragic mistake. Of course they've known this the whole time. And it's one of the first things that they look at is your background and your medical. Before it's all film, right? The scouts are out doing their job and they're watching all these guys as they're watching other players. They're watching all of these guys before they get to their draftable age. They knew about this when it happened. I can almost guarantee it. And it was probably, if I understand the way that they do these things, they have different color folders. They have, or tags, if you will, different color folders or tags that put them into a risk category or a legal category or a whatever. You know what I'm saying? It's all color coded in different variations of things. They knew about this. So just dumb question. And the fact to even think that if Brad is really interested in Ruben Bain, yeah, this will probably be the first year that I melt down if we take a guy like Ruben Bain. Look, I love, you know, how tenacious he is. I love his aggression. I love all that stuff. You can use him on, you know, twists and stunts and help get him free, you know, crashing through the middle of a defense. Out on the edge, he's going to suffer. He's going to suffer. Look, teams are going to know how to beat him, right? If all he has is speed and you chip him, he's done. Watch the film. He consistently loses to chips. Consistently loses to chips. So I probably didn't write that up. You know, I better write that up. I'm going to add that to his profile because I'm dropping the rest of them anyway. I don't think I mentioned that. And I bet you SIS has a stat on it. All right, moving forward from reverse. Just to kind of clear up what he was saying, like when he was asked, you know, about if you're really excited about a player and you feel like a player could help you get to the Super Bowl, like if you're just that one player away that could help you get to a Super Bowl, would you do all, you know, that you need to do to go get that player? I think the way that Brad was trying to answer that was, yeah, if we are that convicted about a player, we're going to do everything in our power to go get that player, right? But he was kind of caught up in how he answered it, where, you know, then he was also asked about like reaching for a player. Clearly, if they are convicted about a player, they're going to do what they got to do, right? My question is, how do you know if that one player is going to bring you to a Super Bowl? And what does that say about the other 21 players on the field that are 24 players that are starters that helped you get to the Super Bowl? You are never one player away. That has been proven time and time and time again. The Packers didn't make the Super Bowl last year. Hell, they barely made it into the playoffs, and they brought in that one player that every Lions fan wanted that was going to propel them to the Super Bowl, Micah Parsons. Didn't work out, did it? Myles Garrett's been the best edge in the league for almost a decade. The Browns have yet to even sniff the ass crack of a Super Bowl or even the playoffs. So you're never one player away. Ever. Ever, ever, ever. But to say that if you're so convicted on this player that you've got to go get him because you're going to go to the Super Bowl if you get him, dumbest question I've ever heard. Terry and Arnold. No updates. No new news. And you can tell that Brad's just frustrated by these questions because it's always like surrounded. Like if you go listen to other media on other teams, like they are so ingrained into the team. I listen to them often and they're asking questions about the team. They're asking questions about the personnel. They're asking questions about, scheme or this, that, or the other, right? They're asking football questions. Here it's, I want a story. I need to print something on Terry and a headline grabber. Right? Come on. I can guarantee you, hold on. I can guarantee you someone's going to twist up Brad's words. Where he was kind of caught saying, reaching for a player. And I don't think he meant it that way. But someone's going to twist up his words and publish an article. You watch. What I heard Brad trying to say is, would you ever reach for a player? I think it was the question. Would you ever reach for a player? And Brad was trying to say, well, if you do reach for a player and then that player that you reach for is not working out on the field, then now you have the double whammy, right? So you reach for a player, you already screwed yourself. You added the picks that you didn't want to give up initially. You had maybe a less of a grade on the guy, and you thought his deficiencies that were there or the reason why you didn't want to draft him in the first place. And then you end up drafting him, but you reach for him, so you give up some extra draft capital, and now he's not performing on the field. And so now you're screwed. And he said, I would have trouble sleeping at night, when I did that, or if I did that, or however he phrased it. I should go find it, because I think the way he said it kind of sounded like he already did that, right? Like he already reached. And I don't believe that's what he was trying to say. I think what he was trying to say is that, yeah, if I did all that, I wouldn't be able to sleep at night because I screwed myself once, I'd screwed myself again. So I think someone's probably going to end up twisting that up on him today. You watch. Good question here, though, about, and this is a great question because this is something that I've also gone over many, 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 many times. And that is drafting in 21 and 22, right? You could kind of take whoever you wanted to take because you needed everybody, right? And you had some picks that were at the top of the board. But you could take whoever you wanted to take because whoever you grabbed, like, you needed to fill those holes. You needed to fill those needs. And it just so happened a lot of those players started and played early, and then a lot of those players ended up being pretty good, right? I mean, there's a lot of good quality depth guys that came out of 21 and 22 and some good quality starters and Pro Bowlers and All Pros and all that good stuff, right? So 23 happens, you go to the NFC Championships, and now you're picking at the back end. But in 24's draft, you're picking at the back end, and it just happens to be a light draft in a lot of areas. And I think a lot of these drafts have been kind of light in a lot of areas. Last year, I thought was pretty good for offensive linemen. Actually, 24, I thought was pretty good for offensive linemen. And so now he's not able to just pick wherever and land a player. You've got to be more concrete in how you really feel about that player because you have less opportunity. Your draft picks are further back. You've got to be more surgical. And I think that's where you see teams like the Patriots and others that have lost a dozen fourth-round picks since 2021. Well, a lot of fourth-round picks don't work out anyway. A lot of third-round picks don't work out anyway. And the closer you are picking to the third round, because you're picking at pick 50, you're picking at, or 32 and then 64 or whatever, right? The less and less opportunity you have for those players to actually be really good players, especially if that draft is not deep, right? And deep in the areas where you really need a player to be effective for you and possibly that year. He brought up COVID. Y'all, how many times have I been telling y'all this year and even last year? How many times have I brought it up? I've been talking about it for 2 months straight, on and off. I'll bring it up probably once every couple of weeks, it seems like, at least. that when you look at draft, from draft to draft to draft, there's consistently a common denominator in every one recently. Older players, because you had players that had an extra year or two of eligibility because of COVID. And so now you're starting to see that happen where there's a lot older players in this draft, especially early. And previously you had underclassmen, or juniors, right? Maybe it's a red shirt junior. Oh, no, I don't think it can be a red shirt junior. Maybe their junior season was really the first year they played a lot of snaps. And now they're entering the draft because the draft is light. So you have a lot of underclassmen entering the draft. Well, because COVID just happened and they just had a good season and there's not a whole lot of players in this draft. I'm going, right? It's my best opportunity to go get drafted. Doesn't mean that player is going to be great. And what happens is you're staring at production and you're looking at all this production. You're like, damn, I want that player. And then that player goes to the NFL and doesn't do a damn thing, right? Doesn't do a damn thing. Why? Because the production doesn't line up with consistency. And consistency over the time, a player's, 4 or 5 years into playing in college, and you look at their consistency. Was the arrow going up? Or did the arrow go up and flatline? Did the arrow go up and then come back down? Like, what was this player's trajectory? How did they perform in college? And if they continually or consistently got better year after year, and maybe they stayed over one extra year and they kind of flatlined, well, at least they didn't go down. That would tell me there's a regression there. Why? What happened from year to year? Maybe they had better competition in this schedule, right? Maybe their competition in 24 wasn't as good as it was in 25. And that player just kind of went down a little bit. But maybe that competition got better in 25 and that player flatlined. That's actually a good thing. You didn't go down, you stayed consistent, and you went up against better competition. So if I had a team of people helping me do this stuff, look, we'd be doing way more, right? Way more than what we're doing now. It's just being able to have the research in place. Like, I can only do so many things myself, but this is what bigger organizations are doing. They're looking at all the intricacies in all of the scheduling and the strength of schedule. And then you're looking at every game anyway, because you're looking at players. So you get a really good idea. You could call up on, one of your guys that maybe is working the southwest corner of the United States. And you say, hey, how was competition this year in the SEC? For this team, was it better or worse? And then you get really good idea of how that player, performed in that final year. So where I'm going with this is the COVID period, it absolutely suppressed talent. It suppressed their ability to learn and develop. And then they come into the league a little bit older. And then maybe they had a few more injuries. And all of that stuff is relative to how that player is going to perform at the next level. But then the question has to get asked. Or as a GM, you're asking the question. I have to draft someone. I need the best player available. There's some risks on this player. Maybe they stayed in too long. Akeem Messidor, 6 years, right? That's a big red flag. Progression was good. Production was good. There were some issues. But yeah, at 30 years old, second contract, probably not going to happen. But is that player, that one player that everyone thinks is going to help me win a Super Bowl? Apparently. Well, then maybe you draft that player because of that. I don't think so. And then he also talked about drafting older players. And he did say at one point that earlier, he said that there's warning signs on older players. He says that you have to be... there's more of a case-by-case basis that is built into this because, you have to look at everything that I was just talking about. Look at their injury history, look at their production, how did their career, develop, how was the trajectory of their career? And then at the same time, he was kind of saying that those warning signs maybe wouldn't allow you to want to take a player that's a little bit older. And then 3, 4, 5 questions later, kind of says that he wasn't really worried about older players. So I'm trying to feel Brad out on this. And how does he really feel about older players? I think he's okay with it as long as that player is pretty clean. So the injury history has to be pretty clean. And then from a fitment standpoint, from a schematic standpoint, it's going to have to be really, really close to what you're already doing. So it can't be a guy that still is projecting to be a project at all, especially for an older player. It's going to have to be someone that comes in and fits you day one and can give you some good snaps. I think the biggest thing out of today, and this is exactly what this is the third thing that I said or been talking about. Well, maybe there's 4 things in here. Maybe there's 5. He was asked about defensive end and tackle. And what he said about Larry Borum is, good tape, thinks he can be a good starter, right? They are starters. Want him, starter. Good film, and felt like he's going to be a starter. Feels good about both of them. In just a week and a half ago or so, I think it was about a week and a half ago. God, I wish I was doing more clips. I mentioned that don't be surprised if the Lions don't get an edge or an offensive tackle in the first round. And I said, don't be surprised if they don't take an offensive tackle at all, because this is a draft where he probably feels what he did in free agency was good enough. If you move Pineda left, you don't have to worry about that position anymore. And then on the right, if you feel Larry Borum is a good enough starter for you and he's an upgrade over what you had on that right side if Penei Sewell moves, and if you feel good about Giovanni Manu, there's no reason to rush in this draft to get a left tackle or a right tackle in the first round. And that's exactly why I keep telling y'all, safety, if Emmanuel McNeil Warren is there, that is who the Lions are drafting. If Kenyon Sadiq is there, that is who the Lions are drafting. And it's not because we need a tight end. It's because he's going to take the best player available that can help their team win. I feel a little differently about Emmanuel McNeil Warren, or a little bit differently about Dylan Thieneman. I think that is a case where you need a player because of what's going on your roster. And it just so happens to be that they're one of the best players in the draft. So the other things that that I've been talking about that he affirmed today. There was one other thing. Hold on. I got to go back and listen to it. Because there's... first round draft picks. I mean, come on. Do you really think that Brad is going to give you that number? He's never in any year given us the number before the draft. It's always after the draft. Right? And even then he's hesitant depending on where he picked and who he picked. Because if you get that player, if you take a player at 24, let's say, Terry and Arnold, and then you say that there was 13 first round picks, but you picked at 24, unless you back that up with we had a first round pick on Terry and Arnold, then yeah, that kind of makes your player feel a certain way, right? So he's not going to do that. I think the most glaring thing that he said here, so if I'm going to read between the tea leaves here, it was this. I think that we can still get a good player at 17. What does that tell you? What is that? And then the other thing, that there's been no talk about draft trades. None. So the people out there that are making up all these lies, that Brad Holmes and conversations about draft day trades and yada, 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 they're just liars, man. And I don't know why people tune into that BS. I really don't. They've been called out so many times, and it hasn't affected anything. The biggest thing to me is that statement, which is one of his first statements, that they think that they can still get a good player at 17. I think that tells you they have less than 17 first round draft grades. I know I do. But I haven't told everybody or anybody really how many first round draft grades I have. That'll come out on day one. It'll come out the morning of the draft. So with that, how do you guys think? The Trace, good to see you in here. I hope you're feeling okay. How do you guys think the the presser went overall. Yeah, I feel you there. A lot of questions that were asked were just not great questions, man. And again, it's like I really want to get intelligent, with some of these things. The one thing that I missed, and you guys, I want to go back and listen to it, but you remember how I said the other day, I'm not seeing as many visits for the Lions. Why is that? Why am I not seeing as many visits for the Lions this year? And it sounds like they or he didn't go to any of the pro days. Was that the question? I think I found it here.
With a specific staff member, he promoted Brian Hudspeth 3 years ago, and he 3 years ago.
Like you mentioned, being out in the Southeast with Hudspeth and kind of seeing the way he goes about his work, as much as scouting is evolving, you still need to have some old school roots, and there's some level things that you can't, there's steps you cannot skip basically in the scouting process. And that's what I really appreciate about HUD is HUD's going to make sure that those steps aren't getting skipped because they're critical.
The process evolved though from year to year. Like, is it like do you still have the same level of anxiety from the first year, or it just seems like you're making all these different changes? Like, how much has your draft process evolved? Has it gotten better? Like, just going in this year, like kind of your mindset entering this year's draft.
Yeah, I think we've evolved a lot. It's something that we take a long, hard look at after each draft to, see things that we like that we're doing, things that we could tweak, things that we could do better, and implement those things and just see how it goes. But, I think it's important to, first of all, you can't be scared to make those evolutions, but also you got to look back at it and make sure that they were the right things. And there's sometimes where you tried something and you didn't get the results that you really wanted, and you got to tweak again. So we have had a lot of evolution from the first time, but the one thing that has not changed and that has stayed consistent is the film. And, that's first and foremost. That's the reason why we're acquiring these players, is to be good football players. So that part really hasn't evolved. That part hasn't changed, but we definitely made a lot of evolutions in other areas.
Brad, going back to Brad's question about the offensive tackles for a minute,
yeah.
It does seem like as many as 7 offensive tackles have been projected or mocked to go in the first round.
Mm-hmm.
Just what's your evaluation of the top of the offensive tackle class? And
yeah, he's not going to tell you that, right? He's just not. He's not going to tell you where they're picking, how they're picking. Hold on.
Always said no, but you guys tell us what the premium positions are, right?
This is hilarious to me. Asking about the premium positions. This was awkward. Like, Brad Holmes was pressing it back on the media because, you guys are the ones that always tell us, we're supposed to pick these guys. We're supposed to pick these players. And yeah, I thought that was a little ego driven there by Brad, but at the same time, look, he's sick of it. I think he's so stressed out and just sick of the BS. And then I think it was Dave Burkett, he said quarterback, edge, offensive tackle, and Brad said, yeah, of course those are the best positions. It's not the draft. Those are the best positions for your team every year. It has nothing to do with the draft. Let me go back to this.
There's no updates.
With the draft development and re-sign model that you guys have implemented, how much harder is it now, given where you're drafting because of the success you've had, and also the fact that you've had fewer picks in the top 100 than, say, you did earlier in your tenure?
How does it affect things?
How harder is it to implement that model, the draft development re-sign, when you have fewer picks in the top 100 range?
I mean, it doesn't really pose a challenge in terms of the acquisition of the players. Look, there's a lot of different ways that you can navigate with having less picks. Look, you might have a lot of picks, and that might not be the case on drafting in terms of what you trade, what you acquire, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, that's kind of what you want. If you can get a good football player that ends up fitting the vision that you had, and he makes it to where he's earned a second contract, that's really what you want. But that doesn't always affect it. But it doesn't affect like whether you have more picks or less picks. That model that we have used in the past, I don't see that changing with the amount of picks we'll have.
I'm sorry, Brad. That drafting.
And then, as the defense is currently constituted,
Yep.
Are you confident that it's championship level at this stage?
Yeah,
as the defense is.
Yeah, I mean, those are our hopes. Look, we're never going to be satisfied in terms of where we're at. And that's what me and Dan are always constantly looking at. Man, we're always constantly looking at personnel and how to add more and tweaks and like all this stuff. Certainly from a schematic standpoint, that's more of a Dan question. But I know that we're looking at that all the time. So whatever you're saying, like how it looks right now at this day, then, that may not be the case because we're always looking to add and, evolve it and make it better all the time.
The drafting challenge for you early on.
The drafting challenge?
Drafting challenge for you, how it's evolved over the year. Early on, you could take anybody, any position. You needed everything.
Yeah.
It's gotten more specific and I assume more difficult as it goes on. Do you feel at this stage even more pressure to target what appears to be specific needs?
Not really. Actually, I think sometimes you can get in trouble by doing that just because you might start to reach for a certain player because you feel like you need that position, and you never want to feel that way when you select a player. You pass up a really good player that you liked even more, but there is a question mark on your roster, so you just go ahead and you get that player that you weren't as excited about. It's hard to sleep at. I know for me, it's hard to sleep at night when you do that, when you don't really get the player that you really, really wanted because you reach for.
So this is the whole thing that I was saying, that someone's going to twist this up because he said it's hard to sleep at night. And then he said, well, for me, it would be hard to sleep at night if you did X, Y, and Z. And so I honestly don't feel like he was trying to say that he did this, but let's listen to it.
A question mark on your roster, so you just go ahead and you get that player that you weren't as excited about. It's hard to sleep at. I know for me, it's hard to sleep at night when you do that, when you don't really get the player that you really, really wanted because you reach for a need. And if that reach, you already reached for it, so you already reached for a player that you weren't as fired up, but he fit a certain position. And then what if the player shows or demonstrates the reason why you weren't as fired up about him? So now you've reached for the guy, and now the guy's not even performing up to standards, the same reason why you had a reservation about him. Now you're really in trouble. So that's why I think you got to be careful with that.
You have done that before, reaching which you regretted?
No. Not that I can remember.
Just
are you saying that I have?
Well, no, you said you hate that feeling when you.
Oh yeah, I just know like we've never done that, but I can only imagine like that's a hard, like you can't take a player that you really you're not fired up about because he plays a certain position, and then the reason why you weren't fired up about him, he shows that on the field. And that's why you had reservation for him. And so now you got the double whammy, So no, we haven't done that. We only take players that we're really excited about.
Brad, organizationally, if there was a player out there, obviously not a quarterback, who you thought could put you over the top.
All right, that's it. Okay, so I think someone's going to twist that up on him today, which, I expect nothing less. I think I don't necessarily feel like it's just the grimy, toxic media that's going to do it. I feel like everyone's going to do it today for some reason. I'm just not thrilled. I think that we could do so much better. I wish that I lived closer, and that I could be in there, and I wish that I could ask some different questions. I'm not saying that I would have the most perfect questions all the time, but I think that would have some well thought out questions. That if I get a chance to ask them, that it would help. It would help. I'm not looking for a story, right? I'm looking to educate. I'm looking to get smarter. Looking to talk football and not try to pigeonhole somebody all the time. So I thank you guys. It's been a long day this morning. I'm going to get rolling. I hope you all have a good rest of your day. Don't forget to check out buymeacoffee.com/Rockdown. Right now, if you go to the page and you're looking to get into the game this year, look, this is not going to show up the way I want it to, but I guess it's close. If you go to Buy Me a Coffee, right, and you go to the shop, here, go to the shop. Let me just make this look a little bit better real quick. I'll do an ad for this or something. That way we can make it look better. But if you go to buymeacoffee.com/Rockdown and you go to the shop, right now you're going to see a bunch of new stuff that was added, a bunch of new opportunities. Most importantly, what you're going to see, why are these not showing up? It's like the page is limited. Even if I make it smaller, it still doesn't show up. Weird. Anyway, I'm on Ross St. Brown, Salute to Service jersey that's up for raffle. And then you have Bears, Vikings, and Packers. Bears, Vikings, and Packers trips. It's $450 deposit, which is $50 cheaper than the next guy. And our packages will be about 50% cheaper than the next guy. If you want true fan travel and to have true Detroit Lions takeovers, let me know. We'll be there to help you along the way. But at our planned events this year, I mean, there's all this stuff you can read about what we do, what we're trying to do this year, and we're going to do it every year. But it's got contact information in there for you. What is the tour rates, deposits, and cancellations like? Your $450 deposit's guaranteed through May 31st. We know the schedule is going to come out around May 12, 13, 14, somewhere in that range. So once we get that full schedule, we will give the full update. And then any deposits after May 31st, they're strictly non-refundable because at that point, we've already made our deposit to Green Bay or the Bears or the Vikings for tickets. And so if you jump in late, then you don't have a chance. But you'll also know the full price, and so you'll have a chance to bow out once you know the full price, and that's guaranteed through May 31st. Our full price will be printed. It'll be published probably within 24 hours of the schedule, at least being noted. The only issue this year is gas prices. I think everyone understands that. Like, it's no secret what's going on out there. Things are going to be more expensive, whether you're flying or you're driving. But what does it include, right? So your deposit will get you locked in for the hotel. All of the driver gratuities, parking fees, tolls, game ticket, tailgate experience, one raffle ticket's included. I do a memorabilia item from Pro Sports Zone. They're valued at no less than $550. We're talking big 36 by like 24 inch, jerseys and, that are framed, real expensive stuff that you see at Pro Sports Zone. That's what we give away for each one of these trips. And so everybody gets one raffle ticket. And then after that, you can purchase more on the trip in cash. We'll take cards too, but cash preferred. And then you get a tailgate. So onboard snacks, you're going to get boxed lunch there and back. So you have something to eat. It'll be tailored to, what you want. Ham, turkey sandwiches, whatever. There'll be a couple of gluten-free options, a couple of, veggie options. But we're not doing just, a pack of Chips Ahoy cookies, open it up, here, have some. No. Everything will be pre-packaged, right? So it'll be high quality stuff and no junk. Look, I'm looking for stuff that is healthy, that also tastes good. But everything is going to be prepared at the highest level possible. And then our tailgate, barbecue tailgate. So certain places, wherever there's Mission Barbecue, that's who we're going to partner with. And brisket, pulled pork, link sausages, buns, rolls, cornbread, coleslaw, mac and cheese, baked beans, desserts, lemonades, Arnold Palmer's, teas, all that good stuff. And then soda, juices, all that stuff will be available on the bus. Have the little mini cans for everybody and the little mini juices for everybody. Whatever you need, it'll be there. Of course, BYOB, you're bringing your own stuff. We're not supplying any alcohol because of liability, but you can definitely bring your own. Your final balance payment. If you're traveling to one of the earlier games, September and October, your final balance payment is going to be due by, where is it? July 1st. And then if you're traveling between November and the end of week 18, then it'll be due by September 1st. So everything has to be done before the season starts. If you don't remit your final payment, you lose your deposit, and then, well, you're SOL, right? Truly SOL. However, I will always work with people. Like, if the ticket gets sold and someone takes your place, you get your deposit back. If I have a fee, because your merchant companies, if you don't know about it, they charge a fee. Like chargebacks, clawbacks, or returns. Sometimes they charge a fee, but they also charge like 3% each way. They charge some sort of a dollar amount each way that a transaction is made. So you might just have to cover that up to $35. But at least you got the majority back, right? Hotel accommodations, cost savings if you're traveling with, a partner, a wife, a husband, whatever, a friend, and you want to share a room, do that because you're going to get a discount, and that room discount will be shared across both tickets. And then if you want a bigger room, if we're able to get you a bigger room and you're going with a group of 4 or a group of 8 or whatever, we will do our best to get you into some sort of a suite. And usually those are more costly, but spread out over 4, 6, or 8 people, it's usually less expensive. So we'll work with you on that as well. Departure, this is just a basic itinerary, right? This is nothing concrete. It's just basic to kind of give you an idea. We are going to leave out of Detroit because we're expecting a lot more people from Detroit to want to go. We are going to stop in Kalamazoo, and we're going to pick up people from Grand Rapids, Lansing, and Kalamazoo, or wherever you're coming from. And then we'll depart Kalamazoo, and then we're going to make our way to Minneapolis, Chicago, Green Bay, wherever we're going. In this instance, like for Minnesota, day 2 is kind of like a free day. We travel the day before. And then on the second day, it's just kind of a free day. So from 6 to 9, you got breakfast at the hotel. And these aren't cheap hotels. These are going to be 3-4-star hotels. At 10 a.m., we're going to go to Mall of America. And then we're going to get back by like 3 p.m. And we're going to get ready for the meet and greet dinner. And then like 11 p.m., the bus will come back. If you don't want to take the bus back, you want to stay out, that's up to you. But you're going to pay for any travel costs that it takes, Uber, Lyft, whatever, to get back to the hotel. Game day, depending on the time, right? If it's a 12 p.m. game in, Central time, then we're going to leave about 5 hours before the tailgate. The tailgate will run to about, an hour before kickoff. If we have chaperones that are staying behind that aren't going to the game, then the tailgate will just be open until we get back, and then we'll pack it up. 3:25 or 4:25 p.m. games, we're going to leave about 9 a.m. and head over to the tailgate spot. If you don't want to go that early, you don't have to. It's possible that we could send the bus back for a second pickup. Prime time kickoffs, we're going to leave about noon on that day because not all areas are open before noon, and it'll just be a full day again. If you don't want to go at that time, you can either figure out a way to get there, or depending on where we're staying, you could walk, or we could possibly send the bus back. The goal is to stay really close to the stadiums. So that's really it. And then the next day, you've got 3 different times that we're going to come back. So like for Minnesota, if it's an early day game, we'll leave that night and not stay in a hotel. Even if it's an afternoon game, we'll probably leave that night and not stay in a hotel. You're just going to get back super early the next morning. primetime games were always going to stay over. And part of that's because, with buses, like they can only be on the road so long. So anyway, a lot of information in here for all three different options that we're doing right now. We're considering doing the Miami game as well. But buymeacoffee.com/Rockdown. Check it out. If you want to go on a trip this year, we're going to try to make it possible for you. That's it. You guys have a good rest of your day. Go on Pod. Go Detroit Lions. Adios.
Pressured by Hutchinson. He goes down.